Welcome to HP FanFiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. In the chandelier of the ballroom in a mansion that currently housed the Dark Lord of the current century, a vampire was hanging upside down. The vampire had hooked his knees in parts of the candelabra and was now swinging back and forth, using the chandelier as a sort of weird swing. Down below stood the house owner, Not, and some other Death Eaters. They were watching the vampire in the candelabra wearily. Each one had been at the other end of the vampire's mischief nature, and not one of them wanted to actually be subjected to whatever idea the vampire was currently hatching in his devious mind. Said vampire, unlike normally, wasn't grinning but frowning for once. "It's Christmas in less than 2 days," he said to himself aloud, "and I still have no Christmas presents." Again the vampire frowned to himself. "Not sure why I'm even concerned with Christmas presents this year. It's not as if I've had the habit of giving out Christmas presents before." Then the vampire's face turned thoughtful. "I don't think I can even remember my last Christmas." He scratched his neck. "Actually, I doubt that I ever celebrated Christmas in the past." He thought that last sentence over some more, his face now contemplative. Christmas had never been a concern for him ever in the past, but at least for a time he had celebrated Yule. Yule is also somewhere around Christmas, the vampire reasoned, and this I definitely celebrated at least for a time, and I think when I was young, there were even presents for that day. He wasn't actually sure about that because his childhood, well, it was a while back when he had been a child. At least I celebrated it, the vampire reasoned. I still do work on my magic that day. That counts as celebrating, doesn't it? He thought about it some more. But it doesn't involve presents like Christmas does, he told himself. So that means I truly don't need to go out and find Christmas presents. The vampire swung forwards and backwards on the chandelier a bit faster at that thought. But that doesn't mean that if I want to, I can't. The vampire swung back and forth a bit longer. Then he nodded to himself thoughtfully. I think I want to find some Christmas presents this year, he decided with a smile. That smile turned into a frown the next moment. "But what do you give a Dark Lord for Christmas?" And so the vampire swung on. It was the evening, 2 days before the students would be sent home for Christmas, when Dolores Umbridge decided that all her legislations, all her new rules weren't enough. Ever since the day Albus Dumbledore had been banished from Hogwarts, Dolores Umbridge had slowly but surely introduced her own rules to the school. Over time, less and less people had been protesting, and instead, most had resigned to her rule. Most because there was still one Harry Potter who was claiming that you-know-who was back, and no matter what she did, he didn't take his statement back. Maybe her decision to add to her army of decrees had a bit to do with the fact that she had found one Harry Potter wandering into the castle doors just a few hours ago and had been confronted by his cheek. She couldn't stand Potter and his smugness, and in her eyes it was high time to finally put an end to his shenanigans. Students, she said, when she was sure that most of the students were at dinner. Listen. The students stopped and turned to her, alerted by her high-pitched voice and wary of her intentions after the previous weeks of her rule and the tyranny she had conducted over the past first quarter of the school year. "Since it's now obvious that this school is in a worse condition than I feared," she continued, "I will now ensure that proper measures will be taken to ensure that the school will return to its former glory." She looked around with her head held high, her pink bow sparkling in the candlelight. "This school has fallen from what it was for our ancestors," she continued, and a nearly inaudible sigh could be heard from the student body when they discovered that they would have to listen to another long-winded speech of their new headmistress. "I inspected all the classes and how the lessons are conducted," said headmistress continued meanwhile. "I also looked into the students themselves, and I noted that there's dire need for change. I have a list which contains all the teachers who will find themselves out of a job the moment this school closes for the holidays. Additionally, there will be a list which contains all those students who will only be allowed to return to the school if they swear a magical oath to the ministry and its laws. Otherwise, those students will be forced to leave Hogwarts and their wands will be snapped. This time, there were unsure looks exchanged, and one or two gasps could be heard. It was Susan Bones, who stood up, looking resolute and yet nervous. "There's a law that ensures that students, if they didn't do grievously harm another student or teacher, can't be expelled," she said, her eyes meeting those of the headmistress steadily. "Oh," the headmistress said, "but they won't be expelled. Those who don't swear the oath ask with their refusal to be removed from Hogwarts' student register. They leave the school willingly, so don't worry, my dear, everything will be perfectly legal." "Did the minister agree to that course of action?" another student asked, but unlike Susan Bones, they didn't stand up. The voice was calm and quiet, yet powerful enough to be heard all through the hall. "Is there a written agreement from him, or doesn't he even know about those new conditions, madam?" The headmistress frowned, her eyes searching the crowd for the speaker, but the only one who was looking at her was the Potter brat, and no matter who it had been who spoke, Potter would have never asked so calmly and politely. "The minister knows," she said instead, frowning into the crowd. "It's all stamped and approved, so take your time over the holidays and think about your future students." "But what about the Slytherin laws, Madam Umbridge?" a girl from Ravenclaw asked, her eyes dreamy and looking into nothing. "Wouldn't you disregard them if you actually go through with what you said right now? Don't you fear their consequences? I mean, the Quibbler already spoke about parts of them in the summer." "Quiet, girl," the headmistress interrupted the blonde Ravenclaw. "Those laws don't matter anymore. The minister ensured that they were taken out of the law book. This will be a detention with me. Tomorrow night, Miss Lovegood." The girl just looked at her for a moment. "I'm not sure if the Nargles won't hide your office from me, Madam Headmistress," she countered calmly, "but I will ensure to be there if I can." With that, Luna Lovegood nodded to herself resolutely and then reached for the chocolate pudding as if she hadn't just gotten a detention for her misconduct. The headmistress didn't even know how to start on the wrongness that was that girl. "Any other questions?" she asked instead, harshly. When there was no answer, she nodded. "Good," she said. "Now, have a good evening." With that, she sat down and returned to eating. "Do you truly think that trying to control the school like that will help you?" Minerva McGonagall asked her icily. The headmistress just stared at the older woman for a moment before her face turned smug. "Don't worry," she said. "You are one of the first who will get their notice tomorrow. Your utter and misguided loyalty to the former headmaster of Hogwarts will just hinder the students while they learn how to be proper British magical citizens." "Of course," the other woman said, her lips pressing together. "And I guess that my decades of teaching experience won't matter in comparison to the fact that I stood by my employer in the past." "I considered it," the headmistress replied. "But since it's only Christmas, I think that keeping you would be more of a hassle than giving you your notice. Maybe if it had been later in the year, I would have thought about keeping you for the rest of the year, but like it is, I am sure the children will be able to get used to a new teacher quite well before having their exams." At that, Dolores Umbridge watched cold fury playing over the current deputy's face before the emotion vanished as if it had never existed. "I think you're making a mistake, headmistress," she said instead. "Hear my words. You will rue this decision even before the holidays start." With that, the deputy stood up from her place and left with a cool "excuse me," and while Dolores Umbridge never believed in prophecies, she couldn't help but think that there was something grave to the deputy's words that couldn't be dismissed that easily. Sadly, instead of listening to her feeling, she ignored it, quite happy with the deed she had accomplished for the day, and far too gone on her new ability to rule to actually understand what she had started, what she had broken by taking Hogwarts's rule in her own hands. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. A day later, in the evening, Severus Snape was working furiously on his new theory. He was in the middle of creating a new formula of a potion that at least might lessen the symptoms. Salvazar Potter was showing thanks to the wrong-gone ritual, when he was startled. "You know you shouldn't waste your life on the dead," a voice said from behind him. "Instead, you should devote it to the living." At that, Severus frowned and turned towards the speaker. "Are you telling me you count yourself to the dead, Sal?" he asked the boy. "No, man," behind him. "As far as I know, you're still alive. For a moment his words were met with silence. Then the other man sighed. "I'm only alive in so far that I haven't died yet," the other man agreed, his voice weary. "I know you don't want to give up, but the truth is, there is nothing to be done for me anymore. It's done. It has happened, and I will have to live with the consequences." Severus frowned at that. "How can you simply give up on life?" he countered, unhappy with the other man, yet unwilling to actually scream at the man who was once his student. "How can you simply accept that this is it? I promised to your mother to keep you alive. You can't expect me to." "I don't expect you to give up," Sal replied, and sighed. "But it was a ritual that went wrong. I've been doing these kind of rituals for longer than you were alive. I know them inside out. Surviving a mistake like that, it's unnatural. I could calculate you the whole thing with arithmancy, and there would still be the same answer. It shouldn't be. Something like this shouldn't happen, like traveling forward in time shouldn't. If I survive, there could be consequences. And not just for me, but for everyone." Severus pressed his lips together at that. He knew that the other man was trying to warn him, but something inside him, maybe that part that still loved Lily and would do everything to keep her child alive, refused to accept what Sal told him. In the end, Severus decided to settle onto the most important part instead of trying to argue against the other man's views. "If I could save you, would you let me?" For a moment, Sal looked at Severus in silence. Then Severus urged him, "Would you? Or would you refuse my help just so that you could die?" There was a challenge in his voice this time around, a challenge to admit that the other man was ready. No, was basically waiting for the ability to abandon him. For a moment, green eyes like a killing curse held the gaze of black as the night ones. Then the green eyes closed. "No," Sal said, and he sounded defeated. "If I had the chance, truly had the chance, I wouldn't go and abandon you or my son. I might crave those who went beyond the veil. I might miss them with an ache that's forever part of me. But in the end, if you'd asked me to choose, I'd always choose the health and safety of my children over everything. Which also means that I would never abandon them if they need me, and if I had a chance to choose." There was bitterness in his voice when he said that, bitterness, but at the same time a sureness that Severus didn't even dare to question. "I'm not your child," he pointed out instead. Sal shrugged, looking a bit helpless. "I know," he agreed. "You were my professor first, after all." For a moment he was silent, but before Severus had the time to point out that he hadn't just been a professor but the most hated one, Sal continued as if nothing had happened. "But just because I got to know you as my professor first, that doesn't mean that you're not still part of my family, part of my son," Sal told him tiredly. "You might not be my child, you might not even be truly related to me anymore, but you're my son's child, and no matter what, my son's child belongs to my family, which means that you're something akin to my own child in the end." "I'm a grown man," Severus countered. "I don't need to be coddled anymore." "You're also floundering," Sal said calmly. "You need someone in your corner, and while family doesn't always provide that someone, in your case you're desperately wishing they might." Severus opened his mouth to object, but a single stern look from the other man made him close his mouth again, for once not denying that he needed a connection to the family. Or maybe it was just Lily, but in the end it was one and the same. And maybe it was that thought that prompted his honest reply in the end. "I can't give up," he said. "You're still alive. I won't give up until it's too late, until you're dead and buried." Sal sighed. "I guessed as much," he muttered and pinched his nose. "Somehow I get the feeling that the only trait that passed through the centuries, straight from my own makeup, was my stubbornness. And of course it's that trait that'll bite me in the arse at the end." Severus couldn't help but smirk at those words. "Guess we inherited the best part then," he countered smugly, which just ensured that Sal sighed for a second time. "I guess I should be happy that at least one part of me survived through time, even if it was the wrong one," he agreed in the end, and smiled tiredly. "I won't try and stop you, but I want you to take into account that no help might be found. If that's what you wish, then I will regard it. But I'm not above disregarding it." After a brief look, Severus's stern gaze added. Sal rolled his eyes. Can you at least consider a request of mine, or are you too engaged in your research to do so? Severus thought about it for a second. It depends on your request, he finally said slowly. For a moment Sar looked at him thoughtfully. Come to the Wizengamot with me, he finally said, and Severus's eyebrows shot upwards. What? Come to the Wizengamot and help me to turn their world upside down. Meanwhile, Luna was walking through the halls of Hogwarts, humming under her breath. She liked humming. She had always liked humming. Nevertheless, it wasn't the fact that she was humming that actually had her in a good mood. No, neither that she was humming, nor the fact that she was on her way home and therefore searching the castle for all her missing possessions made her happy right now. Of course, she shouldn't actually search her missing possessions right now. Instead, she should have been in detention with the headmistress, writing lines. But Luna hated to write gibberish. So in the end, she had decided to follow the Nagel's demands and had started to look for her lost possessions. Maybe she should have felt bad for missing the detention with the professor, but Luna had never attended a detention ever before, so she guessed that it could be forgiven if she didn't attend this one as well. No, in her mind, she was in far too good of a mood to try and go to write something she would never believe. Nevertheless, it wasn't the fact that she was missing detention that had her in a good mood. Instead, it was the feeling of anticipation cloaking the halls and walls of the castle that did it. There was a coiled power spreading all over Hogwarts, and while others might not notice, Luna had always been a bit more in tune with the world as everybody else. But then, that fact wasn't actually something surprising, considering what family she came from. You might be a Lovegood, Luna, her mother had always told her, but never forget you're my daughter as well, and I'm not a born Lovegood unlike your father. The Lovegoods are an important family, her mother had said, but their power is diluted. They aren't a main family. You, on the other hand, my darling daughter, belong to one of the most important main families in Britain, even if you don't bear their name. Lovegoods were commoners, but Luna had always been more than just a Lovegood. She smiled and her humming changed to singing. Her hand reached out to trace the walls. Wherever she touched, a golden line seemed to draw itself on the wall, invisible for everyone but her. Double, double toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. She sung happily, her silver eyes tracing the spreading power with anticipation and a feral smile on her face. Double, double toil and trouble. Luna, what in Merlin's name are you doing here? Oh, hello Neville Longbottom, Luna greeted the other boy, interrupting her singing. How are you doing? Fine. For a moment the other boy looked stumped by the fact that she had even asked. Then he shook his head to clear it. Actually, that doesn't matter, he corrected himself. What are you doing here? Walking, Luna offered and stroked the wall next to her lovingly. Neville sighed. I see that, he agreed. But why do you walk here? Luna looked at him innocently. Do I have to have a reason? She asked, interestedly. The boy in front of her frowned. Considering that you're heading straight for Gryffindor Tower, I think you do, he agreed. Luna cocked her head. Why? She countered. You're heading there every day after all, and you don't need to give me a reason for that as well. Neville groaned. Yeah, he agreed, but I'm a Gryffindor, you on the other hand are a Ravenclaw. I know, Luna assured him. That's after all the reason why I know how to find the Gryffindor Tower. The boy in front of her gawked at that. Luna wondered if she had said something odd. That's exactly the reason why you shouldn't know where to find it. He corrected her after a minute and 23 seconds. Luna counted of silence. No one but the Gryffindors should know how to find it. Luna frowned. That's rubbish, she countered. I'm a Ravenclaw. My house is known for its intelligence, and no matter how many of my housemates actually aren't what my house promises, I at least am intelligent enough to know where the other houses are situated. That actually made Neville scratch his head. He said, and Luna wondered why he sounded so surprised. That actually made sense. Of course it does, Neville Longbottom. Luna agreed happily and patted the wall again before stepping around Neville to continue her way towards the Gryffindor Tower. Neville stared after her for a moment, then he hurriedly followed. Luna. Yes, I still think it's a bad idea to enter Gryffindor Tower. Luna blinked at him with dreamy eyes. "I'm not going to enter it," she assured him. "I'm just passing by." That stumped the boy for a moment, but in the end he just scratched his head again before gesturing for her to continue. "If that's so, well, go on." "Oh, thank you," Luna told him with a smile before she started to skip towards the Gryffindor tower again. First humming, she skipped down the hall, her fingers grazing the walls, but after a second or two she returned to singing. After all, she still had to visit 2 more dormitories after the Gryffindor one, and humming alone wouldn't bring the message across clear enough to her liking. "Double, double toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble," she sung happily, making sure that she could be understood by the Gryffindors she passed. After that she would skip first to Hufflepuff House and then to Slytherin before she'd go to the Great Hall for breakfast, and after breakfast she would go home to her father. Not just a love good, she reminded herself with a thought, and yet a love good anyway. Her smile broadened, showing off her teeth, and her silver eyes started to cloud in a dreamy way that only one other person managed to show beside her, and that person definitely wasn't her father. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Double, double toil and trouble, something wicked this way comes. The next morning the castle seemed to have a shine to it that Dolores Umbridge couldn't remember having ever seen before. In the end, she chalked the different atmosphere up to the fact that she would be finally able to change Hogwarts in what it should have been all along, and went to breakfast happily. Sadly enough, her mood didn't last. The moment her mood changed, the new headmistress of Hogwarts was sitting in the headmaster's chair at the head table in the Great Hall. She was watching the students eating breakfast, their last meal at Hogwarts before the most of them would leave for home. Only a few of the children had signed to stay. Dolores Umbridge leaned backwards in her chair, feeling accomplished. She was sure that after the holidays she would have the school so far that the students wouldn't protest her reign anymore and would finally fall into line with the ministry's guidelines. At that thought, Dolores smiled to herself, and that smile might have lasted for longer than a few seconds if the Morning Post hadn't come in just that moment. Because, in the end, it was the Morning Post that changed her mood into one of the worst she had after entering Hogwarts as a professor. Hogwarts indefinitely closed. Yesterday, evidence was given by an unknown master healer about 79 confirmed cases of torture of students. Responsible for those cases is a blood quill, used by the current defense against the dark arts teacher and now also headmistress of Hogwarts in detention on the students. A blood quill, only used for magical contracts by the goblins, can definitely turn into a torture device when used like it was at Hogwarts. The healer responsible for the evidence stated. But it's actually worse. The repeated use of a quill like that acts like its own kind of magic. It's like a curse, using blood magic to influence the minds of our innocent children. But it's not only the children who will face consequences for the actions of the former Undersecretary of the Minister who took the Dada post this year after the former headmaster of Hogwarts, Albus Dumbledore, was unable to find a teacher for the current school year. It wasn't the headmaster's idea to ask the madam, a currently retired Ancient Runes master of Hogwarts stated calmly, and now, thanks to the minister's insistence to influence Hogwarts in his own way, chances are that the school will be lost to us forever. People might think the man would be joking, but the truth is far more sinister. Hogwarts, already from the founding onwards, is governed by laws that ensure its independence from the government and its integrity. Hogwarts, according to law, has to be independent from the ministry or every control the ministry currently claims will be fortified, one of the goblins explains. And the goblins should know since they have a recording of the laws governing Hogwarts. If the ministry breaks that law, Hogwarts will return to its master's hands. I'm definitely looking forward to its master's actions, now that Hogwarts will be back in the prince's hands. Lies and rumors, the minister said when confronted by the accusations. Nothing but rumors. Hogwarts is ruled by the ministry. It's been like that for centuries. It's always been like that. Statements like that leave open how something like the rule over Hogwarts could have always been in the ministry's hands, if the ministry is far younger than Hogwarts itself. Adding to that, according to the Goblin, Hogwarts School has been founded in the privately owned manor of one of the more prominent magical families. So, if the statement of the minister is really true, does that mean that the ministry has the right to simply take over everybody's family manors just because they feel like that? There would be a rebellion if the ministry even tried to take a family manor in this day and age, a passerby in Diagon commented. Just because the family manor in question also houses Hogwarts, doesn't change the fact that the ministry tries to take what isn't theirs. It's actually horrifying to see that so many people just seem to stand by while the ministry claims property that isn't theirs and breaks laws that existed long before it came into being. The moment the ministry broke the laws that the Gathering of the Lords agreed to, magic got involved, one of the goblins explains. If the ministry makes even one wrong step now, magic will ensure that Hogwarts will be closed to everybody until its master agrees to reopen it. A headmaster who hurts students might not be included into the laws. They are flawed like that, but the moment students are threatened to be expelled or forcefully removed from the school just because they don't follow the ministry's guiding, Hogwarts will cease to be. The minister instead insists that even the idea of a breach like that is impossible. I have absolute faith in my undersecretary, he declared. I can't believe that a woman like her would do such a hideous crime like the torture she's accused of, and I can say for sure that the school will continue to be open for all those students who are willing to do their best in our new, ministry-approved schooling. But can we really believe the word of the minister? After all, today, without any warning, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry closed its doors, maybe to never open again. Now, with the school closed and unreachable, with its laws broken and the minister's words, let's wonder who was telling old wives' tales, the minister, or those who warned that this day will come if the ministry doesn't stop to meddle. Oliver Twist. This is a lie, the headmistress squeaked, staring at the paper in her hands. The school isn't closed. The school won't be closed. This school is mine and surely she would have gone into a rant and would have added a new decree that banished the news from Hogwarts if the castle wouldn't have shuddered suddenly. Dolores's disbelieving look vanished. Instead, her eyes turned towards the walls she had thought to be brighter than normal this morning. Now, they visibly shone in a golden kind of light. What? But before she could ask what happened, the castle shook again. A second later, the golden glow that had spread over the walls turned into a burning blood-red color. The students stopped eating, their eyes wandering over the suddenly shining walls, fearfully. Then the shine spread to the ceiling, and the magic that made it look like the sky outside vanished, leaving behind the naked ceiling, glowing in a deep and dangerous-looking red. Next it spread to the doors, the windows, and then the floor, the banners, and the tables. Within seconds, everything, with the exception of the people, was covered in that fear-inducing, bloody red shine. A lot of the students had jumped up the moment the red shine had spread to their seats and tables, and were now standing unsure and nervously on the shining floor, stepping from one foot on the other to reduce the contact they had with the light. Others had frozen in fear, staring at their plates, unable to move or turn away their gaze from the red light in front of them. The headmistress finally decided to do something. She stood up, took a deep breath, and was about to tell the students to sit back down and that she would look into it, when everything changed a second time. There was a flash, blinding white and all through Hogwarts. And when Dolores Umbridge, blinded from the light, was finally able to open her eyes again, the great hall in front of her was empty, with the exception of a young man she had never seen before. He had some similarities with Potter, but his glowing green eyes were lighter, his hair darker and a lot longer. It hung in wild locks down to his shoulders, only tamed by a spider-net-like hair ornament that spoke of the lords of old. He was wearing formal wear, heavily ornamented robes and a tunic with a stitched green basilisk curled around his waist. "What? Who?" the headmistress managed to say, but the gaze of the stranger seemed to freeze her on the spot. It felt like she was slowly turning into stone, the longer he looked at her. For a moment he looked her over, his eyes calculating and disparaging. "Dolores Umbridge," he said, and his voice was dark and filled with a power that would have let her cower if she had been able to. Instead, her body stayed like it was, seemingly unwilling to bend to her will anymore. "Headmistress of Hogwarts, Academia of Witchcraft and Wizardry." The way he said headmistress ensured that a ball of fear made itself at home in her stomach. Then he looked around, his gaze half amused, half dark. "Headmistress of the former Academia of Hogwarts," he corrected himself, distaste in his voice. "Since the school is closed indefinitely for now, I guess that calling it a school right now is wrong, I fear." "Who?" she finally forced her lips to say. Her lips felt oddly stiff, stony. "I'm Salvus Escher, I'm the Basilisk's son," the stranger replied, his eyes cold and calculating. "And while my gaze might not be able to kill you as long as you bear just a small part of Hogwarts's wards, it's more than enough to start turning you into stone at my will, and with barely any power used on my part." The stranger smiled at that, more a baring of teeth than a smile. "Of course, as weak as my gaze is like that, you'd only take a day or two until you'd be free of it again, less if you were a mediocre witch," he continued, staring at her still. "Not that it will matter after today." She stared at him. "What?" But her mouth refused to cooperate more. The stranger seemed to understand her anyway. "I've always watched over this school," he said. "I've watched over it, killed for it, went to war for it. I wrote down your deeds, decried them to the magical world, and like the headmaster I erased from history for his deeds, I will erase yours." His eyes were cold and dangerous when he said that. There was no chance that he didn't mean what he said. Dolores's eyes widened. "No," she whispered, unable to say no properly anymore. The other just looked at her for a moment. There was no pity in his eyes. Then he looked upwards to the ceiling. "Etrit," he said. "I've come to take your mistress down." For a second the golden light of a rune could be seen, which ended in front of Dolores's feet. A golden cage, a blinding light, and then, "I warn you, Fudge, and I warn you now. Don't play with the prince. Do nothing." "But I guess that's a way too late warning, isn't it?" Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick. Silence. "Dogfather." It was that word that seemed to finally relive the man who had once been James Potter's best friend, and who had once been friends with the man in front of him as well. "Salvasoha," Sirius repeated before his brain actually caught up with what he was saying. "What are you doing here?" The other man looked at Sirius in amusement. To Sirius's surprise, Salvasoha didn't seem to have aged at all. He looked still the same, a man about 20 with long curls and startling green eyes. "You can't be here," Sirius added when he understood where they were. "When the headmaster finds you here, or—" "This is your home, Sirius," the other man replied, a bit amused, yet calm. "No matter what Albus Dumbledore wishes to do, you are the master of this place. It's your prerogative to decide who's invited and who isn't." Sirius blinked and closed his mouth at that. "Who by Merlin's beard did teach you all that stuff?" he finally muttered to himself and shook his head. "Heaven knows your father refuses to listen to me no matter what I say." Sal raised an amused eyebrow at that. "My father?" he asked. "Harry," Sirius immediately responded. "I've sent him letters since third year, but he's more interested in anecdotes and such than my offers to teach him stuff about the magical world." Then he frowned a bit. "Not that I send a lot of letters lately," he added a bit guiltily. "With all those changes and me taking up my lordship, I fear I neglected him this year for most of the school year." He was surprised when Sal just shrugged. "Doesn't matter," he said. He wouldn't have answered anyway. That actually stopped Sirius in his tracks. "What?" he asked, and suddenly fear spread through his body. "What do you mean he wouldn't have answered?" For a moment Sal just sat there, looking at Sirius tiredly and a bit sadly. Then he looked up at Regulus and the two of them exchanged a bitter look. "He's gone, Sirius," Sal finally said, before standing up and reaching for Sirius's hands. "Harry is gone, and he has been gone since summer." Sirius opened his mouth, ready to deny, ready to— "He's not dead," Sal added, as if he suddenly understood how his words could have been taken as well. "It's just that he's not anywhere near Hogwarts anymore." At that, Sirius's mouth snapped shut, his thoughts racing. You took his place and brought him to safety, he finally concluded, frowning. To France, with Katie Bell. Sal stared at Sirius as if he had lost his mind. Katie Bell, he repeated. Sirius blushed and shrugged. I might have researched all the girls currently at Hogwarts when I was there in Harry's 3rd year, he said, a bit embarrassed. Sal frowned and looked at Regulus, who looked as clueless as Sal seemed to be. Whatever for? He finally asked, and Sirius blushed further. Your mum? He mumbled, and when Sal turned his questioning eyes on Sirius, the older-looking man rubbed his neck nervously. I wanted to know who your mum is. You told me your parents' French names, Henri and Catherine, which means Harry and Catherine or Kate or whatever. Katie? Well, it seemed logical. Sal snorted. Only you, he said, amused, burying his face in his right hand. Only you, Sirius. So, I was wrong? Sirius concluded before frowning again. So, Catherine is French? Beaubaton? Sal sent him an amused look at that. Mère was French, he agreed, and she went to Beaubaton. Oh, and so did Père, Sal added, amusement now clearly visible in his eyes. Sirius blinked, but this time around he had no idea how to arrange the puzzle he had been given. So, he said slowly, Harry stayed in France, married, had kids, and you're not James's grandson. Sirius wasn't too sure what to think about that revelation. On one hand, he should be happy that the family still lived who knew how many generations in the future. On the other hand, Sal was even less James's as Sirius had thought, and that hurt somehow. Sal's lips just twitched at that. Yes, he agreed. I'm not James's grandson. And you won't tell me more, Sirius said, feeling resigned. To his surprise, Sal shook his head. The deadline I gave you ended this summer, he said. The moment Harry was gone, I was free to tell you. Not that I did, considering that I had a lot to do and a lot to change. Part of that was waiting for your brain to heal enough that you returned to the man I once knew. Part of it were things long since in the making. I guess, in the end, I decided that telling you the truth had to wait until everything that needed to be done was done. Sirius frowned. What are you talking about? He asked. Sal just sighed and then closed his eyes. Albus Dumbledore is no longer the headmaster of Hogwarts, he answered. At that, Sirius just frowned. I already know that, he agreed. It's most likely temporary. In the end, they always bring Dumbledore back. He was surprised when Sal shook his head at that. Dumbledore's ties to Hogwarts are severed. The Ministry added a new headmistress who was partly inserted into the wards. I don't like the sound of that at all, Sirius muttered. But her ties to them were severed as well this morning. Sal continued, as if Sirius hadn't interrupted him. As of now, Hogwarts is no longer a school. That actually ensured that Sirius stared at the other man. What? He cried. Sal shrugged. It's what needed to happen, he said. The students are safe. The most of them went home, and those who didn't are currently at the castle, which was once Hogwarts under sanctuary laws. The same can be said for most of the teachers. But the magical world has been informed this morning. I'm now waiting for the minister's play, which will most likely happen in the January meeting of the Wizengamot. Sal said, tomorrow is Christmas, and after that are a lot of events the most of the lords and the minister will attend. The first time the Wizengamot will meet again is in January, to the first meeting of the year. It's then that the Hogwarts problems will be discussed. Sirius just stared at the other man. But how? Why? I mean, Hogwarts is a school. How could you close the school? How? He stuttered. It's not that hard if you know the laws, Sal replied, amused. Especially when you were there when they were brought into being. Sirius definitely had a hard time to even think about the implications of that sentence. You planned that, he finally rasped. You planned that, all. Sal shrugged. Not from the start, he admitted. But yes, I planned quite a lot for this year. Oliver Twist, the shutdown of the school, which I only finished planning after meeting Madame Umbridge, and maybe another thing or two. Sirius just corked, his mind not computing any more. Why? He finally asked. But instead of an answer, the door to the kitchen opened. Sirius's eyes widened. Dumbledore? Black hair. Snape? Pale skin. Amused dark eyes. Not Snape. Who? Hi, Pater. Merry Christmas. Severus Snape watched warily when a happy vampire entered the room where the Dark Lord had gathered his loyal followers to speak of future plans. "Oh," the vampire said happily, "there you are?" With that he skipped through the rows of the Death Eaters, just to stop in front of Severus and envelope him into a hug before the poor man actually understood what was happening. Something fell down on Severus's left foot, but he refused to look down and see what it was, because looking down while in the middle of a Death Eater meeting and in the embrace of a vampire would look too much like Severus burying his head in the vampire's shoulder, and he definitely didn't want to look as if he was a little child, hiding his face in the crook of his parents' neck. If he did that, his reputation would be gone. Like it was, all the Death Eaters around Severus took a step backwards and threw him a pitying look or two. "How are you, dearie?" the vampire asked Severus happily. "Did you miss Uncle Anna?" "I certainly didn't," Severus replied dryly, not sure if he should attempt to free himself from the hug he was imprisoned in, or if he should throw the towel immediately. The vampire patted his hair. "Don't worry," he assured Severus. "Uncle Anna will teach you how to show emotions again. You won't be such a sour puss for the rest of your life." Some Death Eaters next to Severus snickered, and Severus decided to remember their names the next time he needed someone to test his potion ideas on. The vampire, on the other hand, didn't seem too put out by the fact that Severus was currently trying to set him on fire with his gaze alone. "Oh," the vampire cooed at Severus. "How sweet you are. I can't wait to play with you more often." And with that he pressed a kiss to Severus's forehead as if Severus was a small child, and then moved on towards the Dark Lord. The Death Eaters surrounding the Lord stepped backwards hastily. Obviously the vampire's ability to irritate the Dark Lord was well known by now. The vampire just grinned at them and then turned towards the Lord. "You won't believe it, but I have a Christmas present for you," he told the Dark Lord happily before pulling out a small package and throwing it at the other man. Said man instantly drew his wand and blasted it to bits. The vampire pouted. "Are you telling me you didn't like it?" he asked, looking terribly put out, "and there I went and pulled it out of that nice cave all for you." The Dark Lord, who had been about to try and curse the vampire, stopped before he could attempt it. "Cave?" he repeated, his eyes narrowed. The vampire smiled, but to Severus it suddenly looked more like a baring of teeth instead of a smile. "Yes," the vampire assured the Dark Lord, "a wonderful cave full of inferi and a basin full of a delightful potion." The vampire's eyes sparkled with malicious light. "It even contained a delightful message for you." The Dark Lord paled. With a shaking hand he summoned the destroyed package and removed the still burning paper. Beneath it a smouldering locket was revealed. It was golden and might have once been beautiful, but wasn't more than a smouldering piece of twisted metal that only vaguely looked like a locket anymore, thanks to the spell of the Dark Lord. "Impossible," the Dark Lord murmured. "It's spelled only for those who aren't the owner," the vampire said smugly. "Do you like my present?" The Lord stared at the locket in his hands for a minute or two in incomprehension, and then fury in a way Severus had never seen before entered the Dark Lord's eyes. "Like I said, there's even a delightful message." The vampire was interrupted when the first spell of the Dark Lord was hurled at him. The answer was a cackle. "So you didn't like it?" the vampire asked. "I can't even understand why. I basically went out of my way to find a present you might like." Another and another spell came the vampire's way, and this time around the Dark Lord didn't even care that his spells were connecting with his Death Eaters, who couldn't get away as fast as the vampire. More than one of the Death Eaters fell to the spells of the Dark Lord and didn't stand up again. "You! How could you? You! Ah, but I said it at the beginning, didn't I?" The vampire interrupted the Dark Lord, all amusement suddenly gone from his voice and face. That actually stopped the Dark Lord in his tracks. "What are you talking about, vampire?" he asked, his voice deadly. "You swore me fealty." The vampire bared his teeth in a feral smile. "No," he corrected. "I swore fealty to the Lord of Slytherin." "I am the Lord of Slytherin," the Dark Lord countered, nearly hissing like a snake. As an answer, the vampire nearly doubled over with laughter. "There's always been just one Lord of Slytherin," he countered, amused. "And it's never been the man who belongs to a family that has been banished from the Slytherin line for centuries." Then the vampire's grin broadened, and only when his hand touched Severus's back lightly, Severus noticed that the vampire had somehow ended up next to him again. "One lord and one heir," the vampire said. "And you, Tom Marvolo Riddle of the disowned House of Gaunt, are neither." The Dark Lord's eyes widened. "Which you know," the vampire added, "since you don't own the Lord's ring or the heir's ring. You came to me and swore my continued fealty to the Lord of Slytherin," the vampire said with a smirk. "Too sad you aren't him." Obviously that was the most the Dark Lord could take, because he let go of the locket in his hand and pulled his wand on the vampire again. The locket fell clattering on the floor, opening thanks to the impact, and a piece of paper fell out. It sailed through the air, drifted a bit, and finally came to lie on the floor nearly directly in front of Severus's feet. Severus stared at it. "To the Dark Lord," he read. "To the Dark Lord. I know I will be long dead before you read this, but I want you to know that it was I who discovered your secret. I have stolen the real Horcrux and intend to destroy it as soon as I can. I face death in the hope that when you meet your match, you will be mortal once more. Rare. Severus's eyes widened, but before he could actually fully comprehend what he had read right now, the Dark Lord sent a Crucio Severus's way. Well, he sent it the vampire's way, and it was only Severus's misfortune that he stood right next to the vampire. Severus closed his eyes, expecting pain. Instead, he saw a red light through his eyes, and when he opened them again, he was just in time to see the red of the Cruciatus fade from a golden shield that seemed to surround him like a second skin. "What?" he murmured, staring at his body and the place the red and gold lights had been seconds before. The vampire patted his hair fondly. "Not letting my nephew get hurt," he murmured, nearly silently. "See you later, Sevi." And with that, the vampire picked up something from next to Severus, patted him on the shoulder once, and then started to hum and sing while making his way towards the door, not bothered at all by the spells hurled at him from the Lord and the other Death Eaters who had finally understood that the vampire had turned traitor to the Dark Lord. "Double, double toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble," the vampire sung amused, and left the room skipping and dancing while using the other Death Eaters as shields for the curses hurled at him. Only when the vampire had reached the door, Severus finally understood what the other man was carrying. It was a snake, and not any kind of snake. It was a lifeless-looking Nagini. "Double, double toil and trouble, something wicked this way comes." And with that, the doors of the ballroom slammed shut, and no matter who tried, they were unable to open the doors again until the lady of the manor did it from outside, 4 hours later, with a confused look and the question on her lips why her husband hadn't come for dinner. By then a lot of Death Eaters had suffered the wrath of the Dark Lord, and only Severus and a few others hadn't been hit by at least one curse or two. The vampire had turned traitor. Uncle Anna had turned traitor, openly and with a smile on his face. Somehow Severus had the troubled thought that the impending wizarding war had suddenly moved up quite a bit. Sal had never known that the most convoluted and most difficult discussion would be with his godfather. To Sal's utter frustration, it felt nearly impossible to talk to the man who was once one of his best friends. Or maybe it wasn't talking that was the problem, but the truth that he tried to tell the man. A truth Sal had kept from the man since the summer. Not that Sal regretted it. He trusted Sirius to keep quiet in front of the former headmaster of Hogwarts. But at the same time he also knew that Sirius was still struggling with his time in Azkaban. Telling the man at all only came into consideration after Regulus found out that his agreement for an alliance with the Longbottoms had been accepted by the new Lord Black, which meant that Sirius was back in the game. And not just Sirius, but a man who was definitely more like the Sirius that once existed instead of the shadow who had existed after Azkaban. This man, the one Sal was talking to right now, wasn't that childish, dependent man anymore that Sal had left behind when he left for Hogwarts. Instead, the other man had grown and reshaped himself into the man Sal had already seen growing when Sirius had been not even 20 years of age. Telling the truth, nevertheless, wasn't easier because the other man had changed. Of course, the moment Sal shaped up to actually say what he had come to say, they were interrupted. "Hi, Peter. Merry Christmas," a cheerful voice called, and in through the kitchen door walked Anna. The vampire grinned. "What are you doing here?" Sal said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "And how, by wind and fire, did you get into this house?" The vampire waved it off. "Archie added me to the wards, and the Fidelius doesn't fully work if the wards draw me in. Well, the wards and your blood, Peter." Sal just sighed at that. "Of course," he agreed, still pinching the bridge of his nose. "Only you would run after me by smell alone. No matter that for you it must have seemed as if you were walking straight against a wall." The vampire blinked at him innocently. "Are you telling me you expect me to run into walls just because I follow you by smell?" he asked, mock hurt. Sal raised an eyebrow at his son. "Are you telling me you wouldn't?" he countered. The vampire crooked his head. "Touché," he agreed, and Sirius nearly choked on nothing at that. "What? Who?" "His name is Anna," Sal replied. "He's my son." Sirius's eyes nearly bugged out at that. "Son?" he exclaimed. "Are you telling me you had your time-traveling adventure together with your son?" Anna turned and looked at Sal in confusion. "Shouldn't he know that you didn't have a son when you started your journey, Peter?" he asked with a frown, and sat down a long, scaly something on the kitchen table. "I mean, he met you before you traveled. I think you even said something about him being your godfather. Isn't that reason enough for him to know if you had children or not?" Sirius opened his mouth at that, gawked, spluttered, and paled when he choked on his own spit. Sal sighed, drew his wand, and then ensured that his godfather didn't die from the revelation Sal's son had just inflicted on him. You, Harry," Sirius finally spluttered. "Actually, it's Salvazar Serendu Harry James Salvadio Amethyst," Sal replied, his gaze suddenly accusing, "and I'm so blaming you for the name Amethyst. Expect my revenge." Sirius paled even further. Is this revelation not revenge enough?" he croaked. "I mean, you let me think you are your own son for more than 15 years. That should be revenge enough, shouldn't it?" Sal just stared at him flatly. "What were you thinking, naming me Amethyst?" he asked instead. "It's bad enough that Mare did it. Why did you have to do it again? Well, or first, if you look at it differently." Sirius looked a bit guilty at that. "Uncle Charles told me about Sal Sanctuary's second name and I liked it," he stated, the end of it like a question, not even looking at Sal. Anna snickered. "I think it's fair," he declared. "After all, you named me Anastasius Arthur Lucidarius." Sirius blinked. "He named you?" The vampire shrugged. "He found me in the past, adopted me and named me." Anna agreed. And then instead of calling me by my full first name, he started to call me Anna. Sal rolled his eyes. "As if you'd call yourself by your full first name if you had the chance," he countered, and then turned his attention to the long and scaly thing on the kitchen table. It was a snake, a very huge snake. Sal raised an eyebrow. "Nagini?" he asked interestedly. Immediately his son beamed at him again. "Merry Christmas, Peter," he repeated. Sal just raised an eyebrow at his son. "We don't celebrate Christmas," he reminded the vampire, who shrugged unrepentant. "Yule, then," Anna just corrected himself. Sal looked at the snake, back at his son, and again at the snake. "Do I actually want to know how you got her?" he asked, in the end. Anastasius just beamed at him. "I swore fealty to the Lord of Slytherin." And while Sirius choked on his spit and Regulus wheezed, Sal buried his head in his hands and sighed. This would be a long day. He could feel it already. Hermione was hurrying through the train, her eyes searching every compartment she was passing by. "He's not here, Hermione?" Ron said, hurrying after her. "He has to be," Hermione immediately corrected. "It's the Hogwarts Express. We all had to take it. There's no way that he's not here." "But he isn't," a dreamy voice interrupted them before Ron could even think about replying. "The Eternal Prince left long before us." Hermione turned and frowned at the young girl who had just in that moment stepped out of the compartment they had just passed. "Luna," she said, "what exactly are you talking about?" Luna crooked her head. "I'm talking about my prince," she said, her silvery eyes looking basically through Hermione. Who else should I talk about? For a moment Hermione wanted to ask who that prince was Luna was talking about, but then she remembered that Luna had called Harry my prince before. Harry hasn't come on board, Hermione repeated Luna's words in a way that she could actually make sense of them. What do you mean Harry isn't on board? Luna looked at her with a frown. He has other obligations, I think, she pointed out, but when Hermione wanted to open her mouth and speak up further, Luna stepped backwards and gestured towards the compartment she had just left.
How about we're talking inside?
She asked. Hermione hesitated for a moment, then she nodded and followed Luna into the compartment where the younger girl took a seat next to Neville. Neville looked up when Luna re-entered with Hermione and Ron in tow. He hesitated for a second before he stood up. Luna waved him off. You don't have to leave, Neville, she said. Hermione and Ronald just need a place to sit since the prince has left from Hogwarts in a different way already. Neville looked just taken aback for a moment. Harry already left from Hogwarts? He asked interestedly. Any reason why? Luna shrugged. He's the eternal prince, she pointed out. He has different kind of obligations that might have mixed with his return with the Hogwarts Express. She crooked her head thoughtfully. Might have something to do with the Madame Umbridge, she guessed. She was a wicked witch. Chances are that her behavior and her subsequent judgment needed his attendance. Hermione stared at the odd blonde girl in front of her. Luna returned the gaze more or less, her silvery eyes still looking more as if they were looking through the other girl than at her. Umbridge? Ron asked interestedly and threw himself into one of the seats, making himself comfortable. I thought she's still at Hogwarts. I mean, didn't she feel ill this morning? Hermione turned and actually stared at Ron in disbelief. She didn't just feel ill, Ron. The boy shrugged uncaring. Yeah, it was a vampire bite or some such, he said, rolling his eyes. Doesn't really matter, does it? She felt ill, that's all. Umbridge collapsed from blood loss, Ron, Hermione corrected her friend. I heard Madame Pomfrey say that she must have been anemic for weeks. Weeks? How can somebody not notice they're anemic for weeks? Vampires. No, Ron, this was not a vampire's bite. I told you already after it happened that if it had been, she would have noticed that she was lightheaded a long time ago. Even a vampire can't hide the loss of so much blood with their natural ways to hide a normal bite. No, there's only one way for something like that to go unnoticed. A curse. Neville ended her sentence softly, not looking at her at all. Luna, on the other hand, looked at Hermione with shining eyes full of amusement, regret, and an odd kind of motherly pride. Exactly, Hermione agreed while pointing at Neville. Then her fingers shook, her eyes widened and her gaze wandered out of the window. Her mind had clearly kicked into overdrive, connecting facts and beliefs and theories. Yes, she said, her voice trailing off. A curse. There's no other way for it to make sense. The curse. A curse can fool someone into feeling good, into feeling normal, but a curse like that, it wouldn't. A curse like that is complex. One of the teachers could have done it, another grown wizard or witch for sure. But she had been in school for far too long. I doubt that a curse like that could be active over so many months without being noticed. If it's done right, curses like that could be active over years. Luna corrected her with a shrug and a dreamy looking into nothingness. Of course, most people aren't well versed enough in curses to do it right. That stopped Hermione in her tracks. Do it right? She repeated in disbelief. What do you mean? Do it right? Luna blinked at her innocently. Of course, do it right, she agreed with her words. Curses are complex. Most people can't do them at all, especially not a curse like the one that has to be active on the Madame Umbridge. Most people simply don't have the patience to activate a curse that would control a human body like that. And it does control them. Curses that ensure that they aren't felt or heard aren't that easy to apply or to maintain. There aren't a lot of people in this day and age capable of it. Hermione opened her mouth, clearly to object to Luna's explanation when Neville intercepted. Curses like that haven't been activated for at least 100 years. Neville agreed with Luna before Hermione could say anything against her words. Gran always told me that curses like that are the worst thing that could happen to a person. You can't find them until they reach their final stage. And if they do, you can't stop them anymore. Hermione stared at Neville, then at Luna, and then at Neville again. This, she stuttered. But it was clear that she didn't really believe them still. Ron, on the other hand, suddenly had an understanding look on his face. Harry, he said, stopping Hermione from saying anything else. Hermione frowned, turning her gaze towards Ron. "What are you talking about, Ron?" she asked, confused. Ron looked at Hermione as if he couldn't understand why she hadn't combined the facts that he had already. "Harry," he repeated. "He has been manipulating us." Hermione blinked. "Harry wouldn't. Why should he manipulate us, Ron?" she asked, confused. Ron blinked before frowning at Hermione. "Why wouldn't he?" he countered. Hermione opened her mouth and then gawked. "What, Ronald? You can't think that Harry was the one to curse Umbridge?" Ron asked and raised an eyebrow. "It's the only explanation that fits. How should Harry?" Obviously, as good as Hermione's brain was when it came to connecting facts, it had left out the whole chess aspect that Ron had understood the moment he understood the last of Harry's chess moves. "Because he has been different since the beginning of the year," Ron pointed out, "and that time, when he ran out of Gryffindor Tower, the rumors about the Hufflepuff girl, he was furious afterwards. I doubt that he wouldn't have taken revenge if he had the chance." "Ron," Hermione said, sighing and ready to object.
"Actually, he's very observant,"
Luna said before Hermione could even think about her further objection. "My prince has been enraged because of what happened with that girl. I doubt this was the actual catalyst, but it definitely counted towards the end." Hermione stared at Luna. "Are you telling me that Harry is the reason why Umbridge collapsed?" Luna blinked. "Of course," she replied. "Who else should have done it?" Hermione opened her mouth, then closed it again without saying anything. Neville meanwhile looked at Luna with interest in the eyes. It was clear that he had figured something out that Hermione and Ron hadn't yet even considered about Luna Lovegood. "You're what? Part centaur?" he asked her, his eyes attentive. "Actually more part elf," Luna corrected with a shrug. "But then I'm grim-touched, so I'm not surprised you went with centaur instead. My line has always struggled with the Grimm's gift we got for the favor he owed us." "A Grimm owed you a favor?" Hermione asked skeptically. "Not a Grimm," Luna corrected, and her silvery eyes met Hermione's. "The Grimm, the first Grimm, Death's right-hand man, Death's adversary, Death's counterpart." Hermione frowned. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Luna," she said, and then shook her head. "I've never heard that there's a specific Grimm out there." "There are legends," Neville spoke up nearly silently, "about the first Grimm. It's nothing but legends, mostly tied to the Potter family." Luna nodded. "The Potters have always been tightly tied with the first Grimm," she agreed. "And my family has always been tightly tied with the Potters." Hermione frowned at Luna. "The Lovegoods and the Potters?" Ron asked, crooking his head and looking at the odd girl in front of him. Luna's silvery eyes met Ron's. "The Lovegoods as well," she agreed. "But I am my mother's daughter, and like her and all her ancestors, I have inherited the gift of the first Grimm." Ron frowned at her. "Gift?" he asked. "What gift?" "A small one," Luna answered dreamily. "It's family history, and it happened thousands of years ago. We remember anyway because my family has been nothing but thorough, especially in relation to our gift." "Gift," Neville repeated this time and crooked his head. He remembered his gran talking about Luna's mother and the rumors that had gone through the magical world about her shortly before she had married Xenophilius Lovegood. There had been rumors about her knowledge of sacrificial magic. There had been rumors of her opposing Voldemort without her ever being seen. There had been rumors about her father and the family she had come from, even if she had officially never told anybody her last name until the day she had married Xenophilius. Even in Hogwarts, she had always been called by her first name. Nevertheless, there had been rumors, and if those were true, then Neville knew Luna's family line. But even with all that, he didn't know what Luna's family would consider their gift. Luna looked into Neville's eyes, her dreamy gaze turning sharp and silver from one moment to the other. Cherrywood and unicorn hair. What a curious combination, she said. I wonder why you never went and got it and instead insisted on using your father's. At that she smiled at Neville and then turned her eyes at Hermione and Ron. Of course, she added, I'd go and try some similar combinations for your wand first, because chances are that I might be wrong. But truthfully, the last time anybody in my family was wrong was long before 382 BC. When the train finally reached King's Cross, the one waiting at the platform was Harry. The moment Hermione and the others stepped out of the train, Harry came up to them, looking them over with calculating eyes. I guess you're going to want an explanation? He asked them calmly, the moment Hermione, Ron, Neville and Luna reached him through the crowd. I don't need an explanation, my prince, Luna immediately replied and then hugged Harry. I've already guessed that there's no chance that you would actually come and ride with us the Hogwarts Express. Neville, on the other hand, shrugged. I don't think that I have any right to ask where you have been or what you have been doing, he said. So I won't need any explanation. Hermione and Ron looked at each other, but while Hermione looked skeptical and ready to question, Ron, on the other hand, looked resigned. It was clear that he at least didn't expect Harry to explain anything, and while Hermione was still determined to demand answers, Ron had accepted that he wouldn't gain them as long as Harry didn't want to give them. Harry, Hermione started and stepped forward to frown at Harry. You can't expect us to lie to Dumbledore and whoever comes to bring us to Grimmauld Place. I mean, that's what you want us to do, don't you? She narrowed her eyes, and Harry shrugged. I don't expect you to lie, he answered, sounding surprisingly uncaring. It doesn't matter anymore. Ron frowned at that, his mind combining even more facts. We're already in checkmate, aren't we? Hermione turned towards Ron at that.
What are you talking about, Ron?
She asked with a frown. This isn't chess. But it is, isn't it? Ron objected. Whatever Harry did, he basically played chess, and I bet he would have been with us on the train if he didn't have his opponent already in checkmate. Harry smiled, a bit amused at that. Something like that, he agreed, and Hermione's frown deepened when she suddenly remembered the day with the Death Eater and the Room of Requirement. Black, she said. Is he manipulating you? At that, Harry's mouth twitched. I hope you won't go around at Grimmauld Place and accuse Sirius's heir of manipulating his godson, things like that. Well, they aren't well seen in the magical world. The ties of blood and magic are far deeper rooted in society than in the non-magical world, he told her calmly. Hermione frowned. What are you talking about, Harry? She asked, confused. Family, Neville replied. Family in the magical world is far closer tied than in the non-magical world. We don't generally go against family. Going against family without standing with another part of it, it's simply not done. Accusing an heir to act against his lord's godson, it would be quite a great insult. Ron and Harry nodded while Luna hummed and looked into the air. Hermione, on the other hand, frowned deeper. Why do I only hear about all this now? She finally asked. I mean, if the wizarding world is different like that compared to the Muggle world, why don't people talk about it? Why doesn't Hogwarts teach about it? And why aren't there books about it? There are some books on that topic out there, Harry corrected. But while they exist, they haven't been on the reading list for non-magical borns in Hogwarts for about a century. Hermione opened her mouth, just to close it again slowly. Why? She finally asked. I mean, things like that should be important, shouldn't they? They should, Harry agreed. But that doesn't change the fact that they aren't taught anymore. The traditions have been neglected, Neville agreed. Gran isn't happy about it, but a lot of others think that knowing about blood magic and line theft and all such, it's outdated. Harry scoffed. It's not outdated, he countered. Magic is based on it. Losing the knowledge about it won't do us any good, in the long run. We might even lose control of magic over time if the loss of knowledge continues, or we might start drowning in a Dark Lord problem. Hermione stared at Harry. Dark Lord problem? She asked. Why? Because most Dark Lords wander down the path of insanity after they use spells and rituals without the needed protections in place that stop the negative effects of magic, Harry countered, and most people aren't taught those protections anymore. Hermione frowned and Ron crooked his head. Are you talking about that blood magic Dad and Aunt Muriel insists on us learning that Mum doesn't like? He asked Harry interestedly. Blood magic? Hermione screeched before anybody else could say anything else. What you mean, blood magic? Ron, Luna and Neville looked at her as if they were confused. So? Luna asked. It's rituals. Most heirs of the Dark and Grey families do at least the basics. Only the most part of the light has stopped using those rituals in the last 20 years. Hermione looked at Ron and Neville in question. Both boys shrugged. It's nothing official, Neville said. But the most basic rituals also used in St. Mungo's for their healers are part of growing up in the older families. Younger ones, like Malfoy or Parkinson, don't usually follow those traditions, no matter how much they speak about traditions and their decline. Then Neville shrugged. Not that all older families think those rituals are necessary, he added. Harry sighed. The current Dark Lord and his views also played into a decline when it came to actually using those protections, he said and waved it off. Anyway, but before he could say anything else, he was interrupted by a called Harry, Ron, Hermione by Mrs. Weasley. Seems like our talk is over for now, Harry said instead, and looked back towards the nearing Weasleys, who had Alistair Moody and Kingsley Shacklebolt in tow. Hermione frowned. But anything else we can talk about when we're back to Grimmauld Place? Harry said, stopping her in her tracks. For a moment, Hermione frowned at him, but then she reluctantly nodded. All right, she agreed, and I won't say anything about you not being on the train for now, but I want some more answers. Harry just threw her a short look at that. I won't promise anything, he replied, but we'll see. Albus Dumbledore couldn't help but stare at the newspaper in his hands. He had been focused on finding out if his hint about the Horcruxes had been right, but while he had found evidence to their whereabouts, he hadn't yet found an actual Horcrux, with the exception of the one Harry had brought him nearly 3 years ago. But now, when he had just taken a short break to take a look at the news in the hope of a change towards their beliefs about Voldemort's return, he had found something different, yet even more horrifying. Hogwarts had been closed. That couldn't be. Albus was headmaster, no matter what the Ministry decided. There was no way that they could close Hogwarts without him agreeing to it. Albus shook his head. No. Hogwarts couldn't be closed. No. With that thought, Albus abandoned his quest for possible Horcruxes, a quest he had been on since the day he had been forced to leave Hogwarts, and apparated to Grimmauld Place. He needed to talk to the Order of the Phoenix. He needed to know what they knew. When he stepped into the hallway, he saw Harry, Hermione, and Ronald hurrying up the stairs. While Ronald and Hermione didn't stop when Albus entered, Harry did. He turned and his eyes found those of Albus. Something flashed in the boy's eyes. Then his eyes flickered towards the kitchen, as if to assure himself of something before shaking his head and then hurrying after the other children. Albus frowned. Something had been different with the boy right now, and no matter what Alastor had suspected and what Albus had thought, after that gaze, Albus couldn't deny any longer that something had changed. But before Albus could think about it further, Sirius stepped out of the kitchen door and stopped when seeing the headmaster. Dumbledore, he said, greeting him. Albus frowned. Something had changed with Sirius as well. Normally the other man had called him headmaster in the past. Being called Dumbledore was basically a warning sign. What do you want here? Sirius continued, his eyes narrowing at the headmaster in anything but welcome. I heard some news, Albus replied, and frowned at the other man. Hogwarts? Closed, Sirius replied, his eyes hard and a distance in his voice that Albus had never heard before in the other man's voice. He seemed even more distanced than he had been the last times Albus had seen Sirius, and even more black than ever before. Albus felt quite a bit of unease at that revelation. Sirius, he started to say, but was stopped when a stranger stepped out of the kitchen behind Sirius. Black, the stranger stopped speaking and then crooked his head to look at Dumbledore. The former headmaster of Hogwarts. What are you doing here? Albus frowned. Who are you? He countered, looking at the stranger. Said man flashed him some teeth that seemed to be far too long to be normal. And who are you that you ask that question? The stranger countered. Albus stared at the stranger. "I am Albus Dumbledore," he said. But before he could add something more, the stranger interrupted him. "I actually can't remember your name on the family tree," the stranger said, crooking his head. "So I can't understand how you can go and claim a right to know my name in another lord's house." The stranger's eyes narrowed. "Of course, you might only be like that because your parents didn't teach you otherwise, but considering your age, you should have long since learned to act with conduct," he said, his eyes scrutinizing Albus like he was the worst kind of offender. Albus returned the scrutinizing gaze of the stranger. He clearly had been taught the old ways, which basically meant that he had to be pure-blooded. Albus frowned. "Isn't it rude as well not to name your name when asked as well?" Albus countered. The stranger bared his teeth at that, showing of teeth that looked more like fangs than teeth. "Sure," he agreed, not sounding bothered at all by Albus's reprimand. "If we were anywhere else, then it would be quite rude, but considering that we're at a lord's house and said lord is standing in front of me, no, I don't think taking away his right to introduce us is rude." That argument actually stopped Albus from arguing further. As much as he hated it, the stranger was right. The old rules stated that in his mansion, the lord had absolute power, and as long as Sirius didn't introduce the stranger, following the old rules, wouldn't say a word or answer any of Albus's questions. Sirius, meanwhile, had watched their discussion with amused and interested eyes. Now, when Albus turned his gaze to him, he shrugged, his face suddenly unreadable. "He's an ally of the family, I guess you can say," he said, and Albus turned his disappointed stare at the Black Lord at that. "Sirius," he said, his voice a dire warning, "you better than anybody know what kind of family you come from. Inviting someone connected to a family like that into your house when your godson is here, do you think that's wise?" Albus expected the other man to immediately feel concerned about Harry. He didn't expect a raised eyebrow from the stranger. "Did he just imply I would bite Pater?" he asked, half incredulous, half amused. "Are you telling me you wouldn't?" Another voice answered before Sirius or Albus could answer to that statement. Albus turned, just to see Harry walking down the stairs. The boy was looking at the happenings with a thoughtful look, his eyes oddly wise compared to what Albus expected. Something had changed, and it wasn't just Sirius and Harry. It was as if the world had suddenly stopped turning and was holding its breath. Albus didn't like that feeling at all. "Harry," he said, turning towards the boy who was influenced by Voldemort so heavily right now. The boy turned his eyes on Albus. "Not Harry," he said, his voice strong and sure in a way he had never sounded before. No wonder Alastor had been so concerned for the boy. "You're not allowed to call me Harry, Mr. Dumbledore," the boy continued, his eyes meeting Albus's coolly. "That's Headmaster, young man." Dodge, who had stepped in just a second ago, corrected the boy. Albus was happy that he finally had somebody with him who was definitely on his side. The boy crooked his head, looking eerily like the stranger next to Sirius, who did the same. "No," the stranger spoke up, crooking his head further as if he was attempting to look at Albus upside down. "I think not." The boy sent the stranger a sharp glance, but inclined his head nevertheless. What are you talking about?" Dodge spluttered and Albus frowned. "I am the holder of Hogwarts wards," he told the stranger and the boy. "As long as I hold the wards, I am headmaster." "But you don't hold the wards anymore," Harry replied softly, and there was a slight emotion that looked kind of like pity in his eyes. "Can't you feel it?" A shudder ran down Albus's spine at that, and Sirius turned to look at the boy with interest. "He doesn't?" he asked, and there was no concern when he asked, solely interest in the facts presented. His godson shook his head. "No," he said, "they broke. The wards that have been on Hogwarts for the last century are gone." Albus' eyes widened when he heard that information. "The wards," he exclaimed. "You must be joking, Harry. The wards can't be broken. They were integrated into Hogwarts since the founding. There's no way." "Oh?" the stranger said and waved it off as if it was nothing. "Those wards are still standing, I guess. Pater wouldn't break them. They are tied to him after all." Then the stranger bared his teeth again. "The wards that you and your predecessor added on top of them to have better control of the school, on the other hand, well, they're gone." Albus frowned and opened his mouth to speak up, but was stopped by Harry.
Anna.
he said with a sigh, and it took a second for Albus to understand that Anna was most likely the stranger's name. The stranger narrowed his eyes. He's been careless with the students, the stranger pointed out. A bit more of a strain on the old wards, and they would have broken and left Hogwarts defenseless. In a year or two, everybody with enough power would have been able to destroy Hogwarts's wards. I know, Harry said as if it was a fact, and Albus couldn't help but turn and stare at the boy he had seen grow up for the last 4 years. Harry, he said, you can't actually believe this man. Harry frowned. And why shouldn't I, Mr. Dumbledore? He countered. It's not as if you ever gave me a reason for me to trust you, didn't you? Albus stared at the boy, who looked at him with a cool challenge in his eyes. Harry, what are you talking about, my boy? He asked, thrown by the hidden fury in the boy's eyes. What had happened that the boy was turning against him? Was it the Horcrux? Or was it something else? No matter what, Albus was sure that Voldemort had something to do with Harry's fury. I would like to know that as well, Sirius said, and leaned back against the wall, his eyes suddenly sharp and cool in a way not even Arcturus Black had ever managed to be. If Albus Dumbledore had to point out the ultimate Black, Sirius would look like him right now. There was a regal bearing that seemed to surpass his forefathers, and a darkness that seemed to come out of the depth of his soul. A man like that was easily a man who belonged into Slytherin, or who could have been Slytherin himself. Albus shuddered at that revelation and wondered if Sirius had started to fall like his family had fallen into the darkness over time. Your actions have always been questionable in regard to me, don't you think so too, Albus Dumbledore? Harry pointed out with steel in his voice. Albus frowned. Whatever I've done, he said, it was always for the greater good, Harry. It was the truth. Albus had always looked out for the greater good. Whatever the boy was actually accusing him of, and Albus bet that the stranger who was looking at Albus with gleaming eyes had something to do with it. Albus knew he had done the right thing. He had always looked out for the greater good, after all. Always. The greater good for whom? The boy snarled, pulling Albus out of his mind and making him shudder. Harry's voice was so full of resentment and grief, so much grief, and Albus wondered if he would ever be able to fix what he had done, fix what the stranger had most likely destroyed by careless actions and empty words. I'm not evil, Harry, he told the boy, trying to reassure him and start to regain the trust that had been lost so suddenly. I'm not your enemy. But the boy just looked at him with dead eyes at that. Aren't you? He asked, his eyes gliding over Albus's face, as if he expected to see the answers there. And Albus immediately tried to assure the boy, to make him see reason. I'm not, Harry, he said. I was forced to decide some horrible things, but I always tried to do my best. I always tried to do right by you and anybody else. Albus wanted to tell the boy that whatever the stranger had told him, it wasn't true. But Sirius was watching him with sharp eyes, and something in his face told Albus that he had believed what he had been told as well, and that meant that whatever it was, it must have been something that wasn't that easily to dismiss. Whatever the stranger must have said, it hadn't just lost Albus Harry's trust, but Sirius's as well. Right by me? Harry repeated in that moment, his voice still dead. Right by me? Tell me, have you ever thought about me after abandoning me on my relative's doorstep? Harry. The answer was a furious, wordless snarl from the boy in front of him. I was a 15-month-old baby, and you abandoned me on a doorstep in November. The boy snarled, his eyes suddenly burning with green flames. Pater, the stranger intercepted, and Harry stopped and took a deep breath. Albus frowned, filled away that the stranger had obviously addressed Harry with the word Pater, and the odd thought that the stranger had something else about Pater previously, something that Albus couldn't think about right now, with Harry furious in front of him and every one of his plans breaking down around him. There was a warming charm on your blanket and you were sleeping, he countered, Harry's fury calmly. I wouldn't have been careless with a baby. Sirius snorted. He could walk, he pointed out in a deceptively calm voice. He could have woken up and walked away. Or he could have been taken, the stranger added, his head crooking left and watching Albus. But you obviously weren't concerned with that. He had his mother's protection, Albus countered. He was safe? Yes, Harry said with disbelief in his voice. Safe and undereducated, ready for your games the moment I was brought to Hogwarts. It's not as if I needed to know the standing of my family in the wizarding world, as if I didn't need to know that my actions could destroy alliances and ensure me enemies for life, as if I didn't need to know there was a prophecy about me and a role in the upcoming war I had to fill. At least Albus now knew what Harry had been told. Obviously, the stranger had educated Harry on the fact that he was heir to the House of Potter. And not only that, the other man had obviously also found out about the prophecy and Harry's role therein in the war against Voldemort, or had that been Sirius who had told the boy about his future path? Albus sighed, his gaze sliding over the stranger and Sirius before he looked at the boy in front of him. Harry returned his gaze with eyes as cold as ice. No, colder. The old man returned the gaze evenly, but his eyes weren't twinkling and hidden grief marred his features. "Harry," he said softly. "My boy—" "No," Harry interrupted him, his voice as icy as his eyes. "I am not your boy, Mr. Dumbledore, and I will never ever be it again." "Harry," Albus said again, "you must understand, everything I ever did, I did it for you. I know it was unfair to never tell you about your heritage, but you were a child. You were far too young to understand, and I wanted you to enjoy the childhood you had." "And later on?" Harry asked softly. "What excuse do you have for not telling me about the prophecy and my role in the war when I came to Hogwarts? You were a child, Harry. When you asked me at the end of your first year, I saw a boy, a child whose childhood would be over if I told him. I know you asked, but you weren't ready to know the truth. You were still very much a child, and I wanted you to have what was left of your childhood. When you were marked that Halloween, I promised myself that I wouldn't get attached. But then you came to Hogwarts, with huge eyes and still believing in the wonders of magic. You weren't as happy as I wished and not as well cared for as I hoped. But you were a lovable child, and I did what I had sworn not to do. I got attached. Then you fought a Voldemort at the end of the year and showed me that you were a brave child, a passionate child who would do anything to protect things you thought important. Do you know how little you were back then, lying there in the hospital wing, in this way to huge bed? You were but a child, and even after I promised myself not to treat you as one, in the end I still did. And so I didn't tell you that day why Voldemort was after you, even if that day would have been perfect, after all you all but asked me. Then your second year happened, and again you were confronted with things a child should not see, and you pulled through. Should I have told you after you had faced and won against the Basilisk? I couldn't, and you didn't ask. And I told myself that 12 was still too young. Then you turned 13. I would have been cruel telling you of the prophecy after you just had met and lost your godfather. Then the tournament happened, and maybe I should have told you, but you had just faced a Voldemort and lost a classmate. Do you see the trap, Harry? I cared for you, I cared too much. I did exactly what I had sworn myself not to do. And now we are here, and I understand that you are angry with me. But believe me that everything I did was in your best interest. The only answer to that speech was a snort. Then those green eyes of the child in front of him met the brilliant blue ones of the former headmaster, and he could finally see the resentment that still rested there. "Bullshit," the child intoned. Albus stared at the child, gawking. He had told the truth. The child should have understood, should have forgiven him. "You might have not told me anything because you wanted me to enjoy the rest of my childhood," the boy said, sneering now. "But you can't tell me you didn't plan the destruction of said innocence and childhood long before I was out of my nappies." "Harry." "No, Mr. Dumbledore," the boy said, and his cool green eyes shone as bright and as unforgiving as the killing curse. "Did you even listen to yourself talking? You told me I was too young to know about the prophecy when I was 11. It's odd you considered me too young for that after testing me with the Philosopher's Stone. I did not test you with— So you are telling me that it was just coincidence that Hagrid went to Gringotts the same day he took me to get my school supplies to receive the Philosopher's Stone. It was simply convenient for him to fetch you and the stone," Albus defended himself. "And the risk?" "There was no risk, Harry." "Sure," Harry snorted. So a snot-nosed 11-year-old brat without any grounding in occlumency is no security risk, especially when no one should know about the Philosopher's Stone being brought to Hogwarts. There is, after all, no possible way to get information like that out of an unguarded mind, and legilemency was just invented 3 days ago. The sarcasm was heavy on Harry's tongue, and while Albus just sighed, Sirius scoffed and the stranger leaned back with knowing eyes. "I think he didn't mind you knowing, Pater," he pointed out, and showed his teeth in a terrifying smile. "I mean, a secret is best kept when it's in the hands of impressionable, young and curious children." Harry raised his eyebrow at that. "Mind your sarcasm, Anna," he countered dryly, "or people might come up with the idea I raised you." Albus shot a short look towards the stranger and then turned back to Harry to see that the boy was still looking at him, obviously waiting for an explanation. The whole staff knew that something would be guarded at Hogwarts, so you knowing was not that much of a risk. Albus justified himself. Harry leaned back against the staircase railing at that. "Sure, it was just as much of a risk as letting a possessed teacher teach at your school," he countered, as sarcastic as the stranger and clearly disbelieving Albus. Albus frowned. "I didn't know that Quirrell was possessed, Harry," he pointed out, trying to make the boy see reason. "Naturally. After all, Hogwarts is just the most secure place in whole Great Britain," Harry replied, snorting. "Wasn't that the reason that I was told when I asked why the Philosopher's Stone was brought to Hogwarts, and if the original wards would have been active, I wouldn't even think about denying it. But like it is, you've basically been telling me that Gringotts with its thief fall is less secure than an ancient castle where unregistered Death Eater, Animagi, possessed and polyjuice defense teachers, and monster snakes all cheerfully romp around the halls." To his alarm, Albus couldn't even counter that argument, but at least he could point out the obvious to get Harry to understand his viewpoint in the whole story. "Harry, you were still a child when you were 11. I couldn't have told you anything about your future part in the war." The answer was another snort. "Down there, in the chamber with Quirrell, I killed a man, Dumbledore," Harry said, and when his green eyes met Albus's that time around, they were old, so very old. "He did what?" Sirius snarled and pushed himself away from the wall, fury in his eyes. It was the stranger who grabbed his shoulder and shook his head that stopped the Black Lord from drawing his wand. Albus wasn't sure if he should feel thankful or afraid of the power the stranger held over the Black Lord, and then Harry's words actually registered. The former headmaster opened his mouth and closed it again. His eyes were wide with uncomprehending disbelief. He opened his mouth again, and this time uttered, "You defended yourself from your foe," he said. "I might have," Harry answered, but his eyes were still so old, so old. "But all I knew when I woke up for the first time was that I had just killed a man. All I knew was that I was a murderer. That on my hands was the blood of another human being." Harry's hands had moved forward, showing Albus his palms while Harry himself looked at them as if they were marred with blood. "He was possessed by evil," Albus pointed out, a bit desperate, but Harry just shook his head bitterly. Sirius closed his eyes in grief, and the stranger, Anna, shook his head as if he couldn't believe what Albus had just said. "That doesn't matter to an 11-year-old child," Sirius whispered. "Heck, it didn't matter to me when I was 17 and killed a Death Eater in self-defense, so why should it have mattered to Harry James when he was a boy?" Albus threw a confused look towards the Black Lord. "Harry James? Why did Sirius insist on using both of Harry's names instead of calling him just by his first name?" Before he could ponder that question, Harry spoke up. "It didn't matter," he agreed. "All that mattered was the blood on my hands, the blood of another human being. All that mattered was that no one ever thought about me after it happened." He looked up and addressed the former headmaster. "Yes, you came to my bed after I woke up. Yes, you talked to me. You talked, but you didn't listen. You never listened. I was a child, a mere boy, and you simply expected me to forget about what happened. You simply expected me to be able to bear the burden of being a murderer. You showed no sign." "No, Mr. Dumbledore," Harry said, and his eyes flashed with death. "You just did not look. I woke up and you were there, talking. I woke up and for you, all was well." But it never was. Do you really think I never broke down afterwards? Have you ever bothered to watch out for me after the death of Quirrell? No, you haven't, because in your world, all was well. Harry. No, you will listen. Once in your life you will stay quiet and listen. You send me back to the Dursleys with the feeling that I just had murdered a man. You send me back to a place where I had no one to talk to a place where no one watched out for me. You send a grieving child to those humans and expected him to get better. I got better, yes, because I finally locked it away inside me in the hope that I would never have to see that monster again that I had become that day I murdered Quirrell. You never murdered Quirrell, my boy, Albus said with grief in his eyes. Oh, I didn't, Harry asked sarcastically. Nice to know that, after all, it was just yesterday that the man died, and it was just hours away when I threw up in the bathroom and scrubbed my hands bloody. Harry, this time the grief could also heard in Albus Dumbledore's voice. No, Harry said, his eyes blasting. I don't need your reassurance that I didn't commit murder now. I needed it when I was 11 and all alone in Privet Drive. I needed it when my friends didn't write me because I was a murderer and they knew it and wanted nothing to do with me. Your friends never saw you as a murderer, and they definitely didn't stop writing you because they thought you were. Oh, did they? Harry asked coolly. Good to know now. Years after I needed the reassurance. Harry. No, you don't understand. My letters might have been intercepted by a house elf, and my friends might have never thought of me as a murderer, but that doesn't matter. All that matters was that I thought that. Harry, it was unreasonable to think that of your friends. Albus Dumbledore said, sighing. The answer was a furious hiss. I was a child, Dumbledore, a neglected, helpless child who hoped just for one thing: acceptance, something that was never provided to me before. My friends gave me some of it, but friends weren't enough. I searched for a parent, for someone who accepted me for me. Harry looked at him with bitterness in his eyes. What I got in the end was a manipulator who groomed me to his liking. I never groomed you. To kill Tom Riddle? Harry finished his sentence. So you're telling me and I was wrong with my assumption that the hidden Philosopher's Stone in the castle was a way to train me? So I was wrong and there is no way to keep children out of the room with the Cerberus, like an age line in front of the door. So I was wrong and there is no way to find some better protections than a simple locked door. A Cerberus, a devil's snare, some flying keys, a chess set, and a potions riddle, and I thought that Alahomora was a first-year spell, and there are better ways to keep a door locked. Maybe you should have talked to Professor Flitwick. He seems to know better ways that can resist a simple Alahomora. Hagrid is not allowed to do any magic, and as Professor Flitwick proved, a key can open a door that is closed to an Alohomora, Harry interrupted the former headmaster rudely. Harry, Albus sighed, but Harry wasn't done yet. And why did you take a plant like the Devil's Snare? A plant you cover in first year? Why were there brooms and flying keys in the room with the absolutely closed door? Why was the riddle in the room with the potions? Why not simply the bottles or nothing at all? We needed a way to get it back, Harry. The former headmaster sighed. So why did you not simply use a Fidelius on the room with the stone, with you as the secret keeper? I am sure that a phrasing like the Philosopher's Stone is hidden in the old dueling room of Hogwarts would have done it nicely. Maybe you even could have added your damn mirror, without showing and explaining it to an 11-year-old child beforehand. Harry, I know you don't care for my reasoning, but you have to believe me. I always wanted what was best for you. The answer was another snort. Do you know that in the mundane world there are child abusers that use your tactics to gain the trust of the children that they then will abuse? Harry asked him casually. The former headmaster paled. Harry, those people often use gifts and special attention to draw a child into their trap. Harry's gaze turned thoughtful. I wonder if Hedwig and the photographs of my parents count. After all, Hagrid was always singing your praise while gifting them to me. I don't even have to think about the cloak after all. There is no way it wouldn't count. Harry. No. And then that visit in the hospital wing, that definitely was special attention. After all, why should the headmaster come and visit one student in the hospital wing when he doesn't visit the rest that go in and out there? Why was I special? You just faced off against Voldemort, Harry. I had to look out for you. You mean I just did something you wanted me to do, so you upped your game by first giving me your solely attention, offering me some advice and understanding, and then using your position to reward me for what I had done for you by giving me the house cup, Harry said softly. Interestingly, offering advice and understanding as well as using your position of power for the benefit of the child is part of the grooming process. There was a growl from Sirius, and the stranger grabbed him harder, but Albus couldn't concentrate on the furious Black Lord. He couldn't believe the words Harry threw at him, the accusations. Didn't the child understand that this had never been Albus' intention? How could the child insinuate that Albus could have gone and harmed the child in front of him? Harry, I would never hurt you. There is no way that I... So it was not intentionally that you sent Hagrid, who sang your praise, to rescue me from the Dursleys? You are telling me that even after spying for you for 10 years, Mrs. Figg still couldn't spot the treatment I received by the Dursleys, and you were utterly unknowing about my situation? Albus slumped. Harry knew about Arabella Figg. Of course, the dear boy would question her involvement and the way it sounded. Harry thought that the Dursleys had been worse than the occasional harsh word and rough treatment. Harry, the former headmaster sighed, sounding defeated. Whatever theories you have about me, believe me, you are wrong. I never planned to groom you, and I never knew you hurt after Quirrell, or I would have done something. The answer was a disbelieving look. So you are telling me you were blind to all of it? Like you were blind to the basilisk that graced the halls of Hogwarts in second year? Albus grimaced. That question definitely wasn't one he wanted to answer, but from the way the boy looked at him, Albus was pretty sure that if he didn't, Harry would make up his own version of the happenings. I was not blind to the basilisk, Harry. I did everything I could to stop it, Albus countered sincerely, hoping to make Harry understand. Instead, the boy's eyes narrowed, and the stranger snorted. And yet Hermione was the one who found out what creature exactly hounded the halls of Hogwarts, Harry countered, his eyes roving over the former headmaster's face. It's definitely normal that a 12-year-old girl finds out something like that when an adult wizard who had 50 years to find the answer to said riddle was still clueless. Albus cursed himself and the boy's arguments at that moment. It definitely sounded incompetent when pointed out like that. It was a difficult year, Harry, he replied finally, and sometimes you cannot see the wood for the trees. Harry stared at the man in front of him with disbelieving eyes. So you're telling me you never suspected where the entrance of the Chamber of Secrets was? By wind and fire. It must be truly difficult for a teacher to ask a teenage girl ghost how she died. Albus winced. Another very well-placed argument. Harry, Myrtle saw absolutely. She showed me the entrance to the chamber in second year. Don't tell me she saw nothing. Even if you wouldn't have been able to enter the chamber, there are other Parselmeaths out there. Why, by water, ice and fire, haven't you asked one of them? Harry countered, stopping Albus before he could reason anything. Nevertheless, at least this time around, Albus had an answer to one of Harry's questions. Harry, there aren't a lot of trustworthy Parselmeaths, he started to say, but was interrupted by Sirius of all people. So wait, the Black Lord said. Harry said you had 50 years to solve the puzzle, and now you're telling me that you had 50 years and were still unable to get to know even one Parselmoth well enough so that you could trust him with opening the chamber. Albus took a calming breath, decided that it was best to ignore Sirius and instead turned his attention back on Harry. Everyone makes mistakes, Harry, he told him a bit pleadingly. You can't go around and damn people for their mistakes. Harry just stared at him with cool, deathly green eyes. Like when you hired Lockhart? He countered, and while there was no judgment in his voice, his eyes said it all. Albus sighed. Another difficult question, but at least one easier to answer than the other ones before them. I wanted to expose him as he started to say, but was interrupted by the stranger. So exposing a man as a fraud is more important than the education of your students, he asked, and the way Harry looked, Albus wouldn't be able to ignore that question this time around. he sighed. No, but he was the only one that applied for the job. After all, there is a curse on, and yet you never thought to contact a curse breaker to get rid of it, or to at least confirm that it is there. That's a poor performance for a headmaster, isn't it? The stranger asked with bared teeth. Harry shrugged. It is, he agreed. But then he also let the ministry walk all over him when they wanted to have the Dementors on the grounds in my 3rd year. Sirius stared at Albus as if the other man had told him he was Voldemort in disguise. I thought the Dementors weren't on the grounds, but surrounding it, he whispered. Harry shrugged. Only after that fateful Quidditch game, he replied, and even then, theoretically, that they could enter the wards of Hogwarts means that they weren't ever really off ground, or they wouldn't have been able to come back at all, as long as the headmaster didn't allow it. Albus frowned, but couldn't object, so instead he pointed out the obvious. No one could know that Sirius Black was innocent and you were in danger. Congratulations, the stranger replied coolly, interrupting him before he could finish. Thanks to the ministry, not only Pater was in danger, but the whole school. That's definitely far better. Harry snorted. The school doesn't count as long as I'm safe, he countered, and his eyes challenged Albus to deny his words. Albus grimaced inwardly, but knew that the only way he could counter that argument was if he lied. There had been too many instances over the years that Harry could use as a counter-argument otherwise, the Dementors, the prime example. Harry, he sighed, but Harry ignored him. And sending 2 13-year-olds back in time was definitely the only way to rescue Sirius Black from the Dementors. Harry added, the challenge still in his voice, especially sending back a boy who fell unconsciousness time after time before when he met a Dementor. There was no one who would have believed in Sirius's innocence and rescued that man, Albus Dumbledore argued immediately, and you had learned to overcome your weakness towards them. It was natural for you because of your memories to fall unconsciousness while you were in near proximity to them, but learning the Patronus, that was the wrong thing to say. Neville Longbottom, Dumbledore, the teen in front of him, interrupted him, and Albus faltered in his speech and blinked. Excuse me? Neville Longbottom, the boy repeated. He saw his parents getting tortured to insanity in front of him. Yes, but Luna Lovegood, Mr. Dumbledore, the boy added, not interested in listening. She saw her mother blowing herself up in front of her when she was 9. But Theodore not, the boy continued mercilessly. His father decided to kill his mother while his 5-year-old son watched. But Ginevra Weasley, cold eyes met the former headmaster's brilliant blue ones. She saw herself trying to murder her friends, family, and classmates while she was possessed by Tom Riddle in her 1st year. But, Harry. No buts, Mr. Dumbledore. Harry sneered. There are people out there that saw far more horrible things than I, whose mother was killed in front of me with an Avada Kedavra. I bet I wasn't even old enough to understand that she wouldn't wake up anymore at that point of time, so don't tell me my memories are worst, because if you do, you simply disregard fates far more gruesome than that of my parents, and not one of those students fainted when the Dementors were near them. Albus Dumbledore sighed and rubbed his temple. Harry, he started again. But Harry just shook his head. You disregarded my health. Instead of trying to find out why I reacted to them like I did, you did nothing. Believe me, even if I was blind to it when I was younger, I'm no longer blind to it now. You don't care about me. The only thing that always counted was your pawn, ready to destroy your enemy, the Dark Lord Tom Marvolo Riddle. If he wouldn't have committed inexcusable crimes against my family, I would have been tempted to join him just to see you fall. This time, Albus looked at Harry with hidden fear in his eyes. You wouldn't? Of course I wouldn't, Harry answered, sneering, and Albus' shoulders relaxed again. Line theft is nothing you can forgive, after all. Albus Dumbledore stared at the boy in front of him when he heard that reply. Line theft. Only pure blood still held on to the old beliefs of being able to steal family magic by stealing blood of another wizard in a ritual like the one Lord Voldemort had used. A Muggle-born or Muggle-raised like Harry shouldn't even know about the power of blood. Harry, wherever you heard that word, Albus started to say, but Harry interrupted him instantly. Don't you dare to downplay what he did? You, after all, should know what unforgivable crime he committed against me that night." Harry hissed, and the knowledge shone in his eyes, showing Albus Dumbledore that he was far too late to hold back the truth. "But then you also accepted the Triwizard Tournament in Hogwarts, even after it was stopped because of the death rate of the participants. That definitely doesn't sound as if you are still as sane as you once were. Maybe you have forgotten the importance of blood over the years, pretending that it doesn't exist." "Do you even hear yourself, Harry?" Albus asked with sorrow in his voice. "You sound like a Death Eater." The answer was a sneer from the boy and a growl from Sirius and the stranger. It was a sharp gesture by Harry that stopped the stranger from doing anything else, even if that else only would have meant to let go of a furious Sirius. "It doesn't matter if you are mundane-born or pure blood," Harry countered, as if he hadn't been called a Death Eater just now. "Stealing your blood is stealing your lineage, and your right as a magical being. My words have nothing in common with the views of the blood purists." "Harry, whoever told you about the line theft? Surely didn't tell you the whole picture. There are differences. Tom Marvolo Riddle stole my blood, headmaster, and I will bring him down to his knees for it. Don't worry. Like I will bring you down to yours for aiding him in his theft." "I never aided Lord Voldemort," Albus argued, now getting angry as well, but before he could continue, the boy spoke up again. "So you didn't tell me that I had to participate in the tournament, even after it was a proven fact that no one under 17 could enter their name in the Goblet of Fire, even after I openly stated that I didn't add or ask for my name to be added, even after you could see the truth in my head," he countered, laying the blame of his kidnapping to the former headmaster's feet. Albus definitely didn't want to take it. "There was no way to get you out of the contract, Harry." The boy just shook his head while the stranger laughed without any humor, as if Albus Dumbledore had just told a joke. "Well, if there wasn't a way, and don't even think I believe you that there wasn't, why didn't you change the challenges to something that doesn't kill children?" the stranger asked, his voice oddly calm compared to the fury in his eyes. He reminded Albus of Harry in that regard, and that thought actually made the former headmaster shudder. "There could have been easier challenges. Academical challenges," Harry pointed out, continuing the stranger's thought process. "No risk for the participants, and still something that wouldn't have made you lose your face. If you simply had changed the challenges to a contest in potions, transfigurations, and charms, Tom Riddle would have had a hard time to kidnap one of the participants, especially me. No one could have guessed that Voldemort would use the tournament to return." Albus interrupted Harry heatedly. Harry just snorted. "Yes, sure. Like the basilisk, my godfather, and the tournament didn't fit with your child grooming." "I didn't groom you, Harry Potter." The answer was a smirk. "So you're telling me you never planned for me to confront Tom Riddle in the end?" "Of course you have to confront him, the prophecy. It's odd that you didn't train me if you were so certain about my confrontation with Riddle. You were a child. I didn't want you to grow up too quickly." Harry stared at the former headmaster in disbelief. "I killed a man in first year and was left alone with the guilt. I was confronted with my own mortality in second year when I was dying because of the basilisk venom in my veins, and there was no one who truly listened to my fear afterward." "I listened when you told me about what happened in the Chamber of Secrets," the former headmaster interrupted heatedly. "No," Harry said softly. "You listened because you wanted to know. But you just listened to the story and not to my fear of death. You weren't interested in my feelings, just in the happenings. Exactly like you listened to me telling you that Sirius Black was guiltless, but then went and sent Hermione and me, two 13-year-old children, in the past to rescue him. It should have been you who did it. It should have been any other adult, not us. We were children. Children don't belong in a war. It doesn't matter if the war is solely done in politics or on the battlefield. We just came out of hell, and you simply send us back there without a second thought. What a headmaster you were, Harry. I couldn't tell anyone else. No one would have believed me if... So there was no way that as a chief warlock you could order some auras with you in the past, so that they could see Pettigrew themselves. There was also no way that you could extract a memory out of another one's head or use Veritaserum on my godfather. What a good politician you are." The sneer sent the former headmaster's way just strengthened the heavy sarcasm of Harry's words. It was then that Albus understood that he had lost Harry, and that no matter what he said he wouldn't regain the boy's trust. He didn't know if it had been the stranger's words, Sirius or something else that broke the boy's trust, but it was clear that no matter how much Albus would argue, he wouldn't get it back. "I'm sorry, Harry," Albus said instead. "I'm sorry that you feel abandoned by me." Harry scoffed. "I don't feel abandoned," he countered, and his furious eyes returned. Albus's sad gaze. "I feel betrayed, and I've felt that way for a long time now. I doubt that any of your words could ever fix what you destroyed with previous deeds." Albus sighed and wondered if part of his deeds were the things that happened to the boy at Umbridge's hands. "If you're also talking about Madame Umbridge this year," he started, but was interrupted by Harry before he could go further. "No," the boy said. "Don't start there. If you do, I might forget myself." Albus frowned. "I couldn't do anything against—" "Those were children," Harry interrupted Albus. "Children, tortured with a device that should have never entered the school, and no matter what you say, as a headmaster you were responsible." Then Harry pressed his lips together. "But for this, you already earned your consequences." "You aren't the headmaster any longer," Harry said, his eyes on Albus, "and you are banned from Hogwarts. There is nothing that will give you back your power there." Albus frowned at that before turning to the stranger. "What exactly did you tell Harry, Anna, I presume?" he asked. The stranger scoffed. "I didn't tell Pater anything. I came here to bring him a Christmas present," he said, showing off his sharp, long teeth. "And it's not Anna, I'm sorry." Then his smile sharpened even more. "At least not for you, Albus Dumbledore," he added. Sirius snorted. "Albus Dumbledore," he said lazily, but his eyes were dark with contained fury. "Anastasius Sanguini. Anna, Albus Dumbledore. Sanguini." Albus had heard that name before. Eldred Wurple, who had written the newest book, Blood Brothers, My Life Amongst the Vampires, had only been able to write said book thanks to his vampiric contact and friend Sanguini. Albus hadn't been able to verify the book, but seeing the stranger in front of him, he suddenly couldn't deny that the other man was a vampire any longer, no matter if the vampire in front of him was the one that Eldred Wurple had befriended or not. Albus had never heard that the vampire in question had a first name, or any other name but Sanguini. You're a vampire." It was out before Albus could stop it and turn it into something more dignified. The other man, the vampire, bared his teeth in amusement and dread. His fangs gleamed in the dark hallway. "You only noticed that now, Albus Dumbledore?" he asked, half amused, and yet with a gleam in his eyes that made Albus shudder. Albus immediately reached for his wand. He was stopped by Harry, who turned his wand on him before Albus could even draw his own. "I wouldn't do that," Harry told him, his eyes dark and furious. "I'm already furious beyond words with you. If you draw your wand on Anna, I will forget myself, oath or no oath." The vampire winced. "Pater." "No, he's right," another voice spoke up from the shadows of the kitchen, and then another man stepped out of it. "I think I am more than furious with him after all, what I heard and saw right now and over the last 15 years, and I'm barely affected by his deeds." Albus turned towards the new stranger, and his breathing seemed to stop for a second. "Regulus Black," he whispered. The boy, now man, looked at him with eyes so much like Sirius's that Albus actually looked back towards the Black Lord to assure himself that the other man hadn't transformed himself into a likeness of his dead younger brother. The Black Lord was still next to the vampire, looking at Albus with hooded eyes. Dodge, on the other hand, who had stayed silent all over the argument between Albus and Harry, frowned at the appearance of the Black Heir. "You're a Death Eater," he said. Regulus shrugged, but then Sirius piped up. "Former," he corrected, his eyes wandering towards Dodge. "He is reformed, so you shouldn't have anything against him." Albus opened his mouth to counter that there was no evidence that the young man was reformed, when Sirius added, "And if you doubt it, then don't forget that you're saying the same about Snape, and he still goes to Death Eater meetings." "Sirius." Albus sighed at that, but was interrupted by the Black Lord immediately. Are you doubting my word? He asked, and there was a challenge that made Albus cautious. Dodge scoffed. Of course we are, he agreed. Regulus Black is a known Death Eater after all, and he's my brother and heir, and I said he's not. Sirius countered. So, are you doubting my words? Sirius. But before Albus could say anything else, Sirius looked at him in challenge. I asked you a question. I expect an answer, Albus Dumbledore, he said, and for a moment Albus saw Phineas Nicholas Black instead of Sirius standing in front of him. Dodge is right, Sirius, he said in the end. There is no evidence that shows we could trust him. I don't understand why you invited him in, but he has to leave and we have to reset the wards, just in case, you know. Sirius stared at Albus for a moment, then he slowly inclined his head. Yes, he said, drawing the word out. We should reset the wards. Albus nodded and was about to gesture for Sanguini and Regulus Black to leave, when Sirius continued. It would be best if you left, Albus Dumbledore, he said, sounding oddly formal, and never return. Don't worry, I will keep Harry James safe. But I think it would be best for you and Dodge to leave and me to reset the wards to keep you out. Albus stared at Sirius, and the Black Lord stared back. There was no trace of the boy that was once Sirius Black left. It was as if the man had shred the mask that had been Sirius and stepped out to show that he was a true Black, and as bothersome as any other Black that Albus ever encountered. It was then that Albus finally connected the dots in his head, and he finally understood what had changed in Sirius. You commanded your family magic, he said, feeling horrified. You actually went and commanded your family magic. Don't you know that doing something like that will ensure that you lose your sanity over time? Sirius scoffed. My grandfather and my great-grandfather both commanded it, and never went insane, he countered. So why should I? They didn't go insane because rumors said they learned forbidden magics done by Salazar Slytherin to protect themselves from it. Albus countered. You never did something like that, Sirius. Sirius snorted. It seems you know me less than you thought, Dumbledore, Sirius countered, and there was a dark amusement in his eyes. I learned the rituals as a child, just like them. And yet, the boy had still gone to Gryffindor, had still been a friend to James Potter, had still fought against Death Eaters and Voldemort, had still renounced his legacy as the heir of Black. Albus couldn't even comprehend how that had been possible when Sirius hadn't been different from the other Blacks all along. Sirius, please, don't give in to the darkness now, he finally pleaded. Think about your godson. Think about... I am, Sirius assured him. And that's the reason why you have to leave now and why I don't want you to ever come back, Albus. For a moment, Albus wanted to protest. Then he finally closed his eyes and sighed before stopping Dodge with a single glance from interfering. As you wish, he said. Just remember that Harry grew up as a muggle. He doesn't know anything about our world. Sirius frowned at him, but in the end slowly inclined his head. I won't throw him to the wolves by dragging him into politics, he said, and rolled his eyes. I'm not heartless. He will go when he's ready. Which he wouldn't be until January, Albus knew. At least the boy wouldn't be forced to attend the Wizengamot right now, and Albus was sure that in time he would be able to show Sirius and Harry that he had only their best interest in heart. All would be well, even if it didn't look like that right now. With that thought, Albus and Dodge left Grimmauld Place. At least the Weasleys were still allowed into the house. They would keep Sirius in line. Little did Albus know that all of his hopes were useless already. Harry watched the former headmaster leave with unreadable eyes. Wow, Anna said the moment the former headmaster was gone. Did you actually throw him out right now? I thought he was something great for your, or whatever. No Black works with Albus Dumbledore, Harry answered before Sirius could actually sort out his feelings. Sirius followed my father James in the First War. With my father dead and me going against Dumbledore, he isn't about to follow him any longer. Sirius blinked, then shrugged. That's one way to explain it, he agreed before he frowned. But now I'll have to explain the Weasleys why the former headmaster won't come by over the holidays. They won't ask, Harry assured him. The only one who might be Hermione, but the Weasleys won't. They're not loyal to Albus Dumbledore any longer. Sirius blinked at that. All right, he offered, confused. Harry smiled a bit amused. You will see, he said. It's politics. It will come out in the January meeting of the Wizengamot. Sirius raised an eyebrow. The one that Dumbledore doesn't want you to attend? He asked, obviously having caught the meaning behind the former headmaster's words. Exactly, Harry replied before looking at Sirius in amusement. You're not going to stop me from attending, are you? Sirius scoffed. I guess you can handle yourself, he countered. So I definitely don't see a reason to keep you away from politics. Harry smirked. Good, he said, and then gestured towards the kitchen. And now let's get rid of Anna's Christmas present, before the children notice I'm not sleeping in my room. The 7th of January was a cool and stormy day. Rain clouds had threatened all night, and in the early morning hours they finally brought down the thunderstorm they had promised. Nevertheless, a lot of people were outside and walking up and down Diagon Alley. It was the day of the first annual meeting of the Wizengamot, and like every first annual meeting, this one was a live broadcast in the Wizarding Wireless. So, like always, a lot of people were coming to Diagon Alley to listen to the broadcast and then discuss it with their fellow witch and wizards. The leaky cauldron was already crammed, even if the Wizengamot broadcast wouldn't start for another few hours. Fortunescu's was about to be crammed as well soon. And soon, every other shop that had a radio would end up crammed as well. And a lot of shops had one because no matter what everybody else said, having people in their shops often ended with quite a few people buying things that they wouldn't have bought if they hadn't entered the shop that day. Because of that, the 7th of January was one of the busiest days in the year for Diagon Alley. But not just for Diagon Alley. The ministry was about to be crowded as well. Journalists, Wizengamot members and their families, ministry employees, some of them working, some of them acting as if they were working, and some of them blatantly gathering in the public parts of the Wizengamot chamber to listen. And a lot of people who were never seen in the Wizengamot outside of this day were all also gathered in the hallways and the Wizengamot chamber. Nobody actually expected a lot of work being done today by those who weren't active in the Wizengamot. The chamber itself would soon be filled with more members of the Wizengamot on that day than normally attended in 3 separate sessions over the rest of the year. Nevertheless, the last thing was still off for a few hours. Right now, the chamber was still empty, most Wizengamot members still at home, getting ready for the day. Of course, not all people were about to get ready already. Some were standing in the middle of a kitchen, having arguments instead. No Anna, no chance. But Peter? No chance! Of course, that wasn't the start of the argument. Instead, the argument had started quite simple. Can I come with you, Peter? Harry eyed his son skeptically. I'm somehow thinking this might not be a good idea, he countered slowly. Anna pouted. Why? He asked, as if he was a 7-year-old. Harry raised an eyebrow at his son. Are you really asking me that right now, Anastasis? He countered. His son frowned, making doe eyes at him. I'll be on my best behavior, Peter, he promised with big eyes. Harry looked at him skeptically. Like you were with Godric, he asked with a raised eyebrow. Or Rowena, with the Blacks in the last war against Riddle, or with Riddle just weeks ago. The vampire pouted. I know how to behave, Peter. I always followed your demands. Harry raised a skeptical eyebrow, so Anastasius decided to elaborate. I took Peveril with me, and Godric to rescue you so that I was not just accompanied by Gryffindors, Anna argued. And I just told Reyna that I wouldn't force her children to live with the names she had chosen originally. Harry just looked at his son with raised eyebrows. And I didn't confront old Voldy last war, just like you told me to. The vampire added hurriedly. So, you went behind my back and played with him this time around, Harry pointed out. Anna pouted. Archie said something like that to me in the last war when you weren't in the room, he argued. I mean, he was right. If you don't know it until it's done, you can't prohibit it. Harry sighed and then pinched his nose. Arcturus, he said, startling Sirius by using that familiar name. You decided to go and listen to Arcturus. He's a black, Anna argued immediately. We're related. The last time you had something to do with a black, you tried to convince Perdita to go dragon hunting, Harry pointed out calmly. Anna pouted. It was a joke. She was your sister. She looked up to you. I I said I was sorry back then. And yet, you weren't better when it came to the blacks in the last war, Harry pointed out with a pointed look. No, I stand by my decision. You're not coming with me to the Wizengamot. Anna looked at him with puppy-dog eyes. But Peter, he protested before his father interrupted him again. No buts, Anastasius, Harry countered. There's no argument in the whole world that would make me take you with me to the Wizengamot. Sirius, who had been following the discussion with interest, frowned at that. That sounds quite finite, he said, surprised. Harry snorted. That's because it is, he countered. Anna, well, let's say there is a reason why he's not allowed to come, which may or may not have anything to do with him, and more than one black in the room usually ends in absolute chaos. Anna pouted. That's not true. Harry looked at him pointedly. Perdita, he pointed out. Anna frowned at him. She doesn't count. She was my sister, he countered stubbornly. Harry just raised his eyebrow in challenge. Arcturus and Pollux. Anna opened his mouth to protest, but was stopped when Harry continued. Alphard and Marius, he said. Daria. All right, you made your point, Anna said, pouting, before he suddenly turned hopeful. But we could solve it differently. Harry raised his eyebrow at that suggestion. And how do you think we could do that, he asked, a bit amused about his son. You could keep your dog-father home, Anastasius pointed out, or your black follower. Of course that would be Anna's try to resolve it. Not an option, Harry countered. You're staying him, child of mine. I don't want absolute mayhem in the Wizengamot after all. And Harry knew that his child would be responsible for mayhem if he was allowed to come. Harry couldn't remember even one incident like that in the past that didn't end in mayhem when Anna was involved. So I should stay here and twiddle my thumbs, Anna asked, sniffing and pouting. Harry shrugged, unimpressed. For a moment he was tempted to tell his child that this was actually what he should do, but Harry knew his son. If he told his son that yes, he should twiddle his thumbs, Anna would certainly manage to get into trouble somehow. So Harry guessed that there was just one answer he could give. He wasn't about to let his child run into danger, so the only way he could do something about it was to curb it by giving Anna something to do. Or you could go to Diagon Alley, Harry pointed out, in the hope to ensure that his boy would be occupied and out of danger. You shouldn't end up bored there. Sirius in the background laughed, amused, while watching his godson trying to curb his own child's tendencies to end up in danger. Harry threw him a half-annoyed, half-amused look. It's the best, believe me, he assured his godfather. A bored Anna is the worst thing that can happen. Having him go to Diagon Alley is the better idea. Harry would end up regretting his suggestion. Nevertheless, just minutes after Sirius Black, new Lord of Black, finally left to the Wizengamot meeting. He knew he was early, but he was also nervous and had decided to watch the other Wizengamot members while they entered. So, Sirius had decided to find a dark corner to watch. There, he was standing in the dark, watching the other people all around him. His grey eyes were sharp in a way they hadn't been for a long time. This was it. It had been a long time coming. This was the day everything would finally change. Are you ready? The man next to Sirius spoke up and leaned against the wall so that he was hidden even further in the shadows than Sirius already was. Sirius sighed. Do I have a choice? He countered. It's now or never. Not for you, brother, the other man pointed out. You're not that involved that you couldn't back out if you wanted to. Sirius sighed and closed his eyes. I might be able to back out if I wanted to, he agreed finally, but... He sighed again and shook his head. This is the end. Salvus Sahar might not need me, but I need to show him that I'm still there for him, Sirius told his younger brother calmly. I'm a black. We stand by the side of our allies. We can't leave him to fight this last battle alone. Regulus smiled at that. He wouldn't fight alone, he said. We're not his only allies. Sirius guessed that his brother were right, but there was more to it. Harry, Salvus Sahar, was a friend, had been a friend since they had met in the last war. Sirius couldn't just ignore that friendship. He couldn't ignore what Salva done for him in the past, and couldn't ignore what Salva done for Lily and James. But most of all, Sirius couldn't ignore that Salvus-born his godson, and therefore was part of his family. We're his family, Sirius pointed out calmly. If we don't stand by him, who else? Regulus looked at his brother with warmth in his eyes. The rest of his family, he pointed out. Sirius waved it off. They're not we, he said. It doesn't matter how many people stand behind him, we're his family. We won't stop to stand by him just because he has someone else's family or counts them as family. It doesn't mean that we should ignore our relation. Regulus nodded slowly. Then don't, he told his brother softly. Sirius returned the smile faintly. I won't, he agreed, took a deep breath, and then closed his eyes. I won't. This will be my choice. This will be our chance to change. Regulus smiled. You're right, he agreed. This will be our chance to change everything. He squeezed his brother's shoulder. Let's go in and ensure some chaos, Regulus told Sirius. Sirius smiled. Just like the rest of the blacks always did, he said, amused. Regulus smirked. I guess let's be blacks, he agreed, and then gestured towards the doors of the Wizengamot. I hope the magical world is prepared for our return. Sirius snorted and stepped forward towards the doors. You and I know that there's no way they could ever be prepared for us, he countered before finally stepping out of the shadows. His brother followed him with amusement gleaming in his eyes. This was the Wizengamot. This was their chance to change everything, and that's what they would do. Meanwhile, Anastasius Arthur Lucidarius Sanguini was walking through the streets of Diagon Alley, watching the people entering the shops in the hope of finding a space to listen to the wizarding wireless. They're odd, aren't they? A voice spoke up next to him. Anastasius turned his head and looked down at the speaker next to him. Hello there, little moon, he greeted the girl. Dreamy silver eyes looked up to him. Blonde hair, nearly silvery white, gleamed in the morning sun. Good morning, my immortal, she greeted him back with a smile. Why are you here today? Anastasius smiled at the girl. I'm just here to be out of the way, he said. Why are you here, little moon? Helping Papa, she said with a smile. Anna crooked his head. An odd way to describe your grandfather, he remarked, and the girl shrugged. I could have called him grandpapa, but truthfully, a papa doesn't look like a grandpapa. He's definitely an apapa. Anna rubbed his mouth at that exclamation, so the girl elaborated further. That's like you calling your father father or daddy, she told him. Anna shuddered. Yes, he said. I fully understand. Pater is Pater. Calling him anything else would just be wrong. The girl, one Luna Lovegood, nodded wisely. Exactly, she said. Just like Opapa's Opapa. She crooked her head to look at Anna thoughtfully. How did the immortal prince like your Yule present, she asked, the vampire next to her. Anna smiled. He loved it, he told her happily. Not that he liked particularly how I got it, but nevertheless he loved it. Good, Luna said, and then reached out to take Anna's hand. The vampire looked down to their joined hands, but didn't even try to free his hand from her grip. Does Pater know you know me? Anna asked interestedly. Luna shrugged. I think so, she countered. Mummy knew you and liked you, and he knew that you kept in contact with her even after the war. So why shouldn't he know we know each other? Anna thought that over, and finally nodded slowly. I guess, he agreed and then shrugged. I also like your papa. He's a very nice guy. Luna threw the vampire an amused look. Of course he is, she agreed. He's a papa. Nana nodded wisely. And you're here to help him? He asked, interestedly. Luna looked at Anna in amusement. Papa will be occupied today, she said. Somebody has to be here. Anna nodded in understanding. Of course, little moon, he agreed. Luna smiled at him. Do you want to walk with me? She asked. Anna smiled at her. Are you telling me something interesting might happen here today? He asked. Luna's smile sharpened. It's the first meeting of the Wizengamot in January, she said. Of course there might be something happen today, my immortal. Anna returned her sharp smile with a baring of teeth of his own. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble, Luna hummed amused. Double, double, toil and trouble, something wicked this way comes.